Hello, and first, welcome Water Bucket Gaming, Discount Seth Rogen, Bob Marley. Always a pleasure to see you, and thank you so much for passing by. And also, shout out to Water Bucket Gaming, if I could do this properly, always. Who is a health and fitness streamer, and I believe they do, if I remember correctly, some arts and crafts streams as well. And they're also part of Shy's community as well. And while they're pretty much a part of the overall fitness and health community, like I used to be, but I'm trying to get back into the workout streams. I'm still sort of like looking for a new space, or rather, more or less confirming that I have the new space that I'm planning to hopefully stream from. But like, yeah, unfortunately, as mentioned, the workout streams are on the back burner for now. But like, I'm doing my best to resurrect them because like I totally, these are essentially my passions, both the science, the research, and the health and fitness, and the workout streams. I'm doing my best. Where I think, like I said, optimistically, I think in the next like month or two, I should be able to have the workout streams up and running. No promises, but like again, I'm really trying my best. And even though the workout streams are on the back burner, I still cover some health and fitness news and research. Actually, that's more or less what I'm going to start off with. And it's actually a really nice intersection between health, fitness, and let's say cognitive health or psychological health, where there's some new research about some supplement. Well, I'm not going to spoil it, but it actually works out quite nicely because this is a supplement that I've been taking for a while, like going back, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And like this supplement, there's nothing really special about it, or at least, there's not a lot of great research about it. Where my approach to supplementation is like, I'm always just, let's say, under the assumption that any supplement that I take, I'm potentially wasting my money. And more or less, whenever I start any supplement, I more or less look for safety. And if it's safe and there is some potential benefit that I think will actually be beneficial, then I'm more or less like, I'm willing to spend some amount of money. But I'm aware that that money might be fully wasted because supplements are like a very tricky thing. But this particular supplement, there's some decent amount of research behind it, but it seems like there's more and more research coming out, sort of maybe showing its potential benefits, but nothing really fully conclusive. And yeah, thank you so much, Water Bucket Gaming. We're super appreciated to have anyone pass by, and I've been sort of like spying on your content here and there. And obviously, I definitely know you from Shy's community, which also shout out to Shy, who just a few days ago, or 2 days ago, did their rave stream, which was fantastic. Where, yeah, if you want other, arguably much better fitness streamers than me, like Shy and Water Bucket and a whole host of other health and fitness streamers are out there. And the peer review, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. Always great to see you. So I agree with your ranking. But actually, we should just like dive right into it. But let me just catch up. If you ever settle down in someplace, are you planning on building a home? Are we like that's the goal? That's like, as of right now, that's the pipe dream, arguably. Where it's like, yeah, ideally I would want a home gym, but right now, my apartment's definitely not suited for any real barbell workouts. Not only just like base constraints, but also I want to at least be polite and not deadlift, above my neighbors. I'm not even sure my floors can handle it, to be perfectly honest. And yeah, TRT, I agree with that ranking. TRT, caffeine. Actually, I think I would probably switch the creatine to caffeine. I don't know. Depends. And Absolutely Shy is amazing. In, well, pretty much just about every way. I usually stream for about 3 hours, but I tend to go longer. It's usually in the range of like 3 to 4 hours, but I have been known to occasionally stream for like 4.5 hours. I think I've done like a couple of 5-hour streams here and there. But usually my minimum is like 3 hours. But yeah, so this was published like literally today. Came across my newsfeed about a bodybuilding. I don't know if I'd really call it a bodybuilding supplement, at least in my opinion. This is a supplement that I take, where it's basically essentially a fancy amino acid. It's called HMB, and so, but it seems to have. So the reason why I take it and have been taking it for a while, it's because essentially it appears to, based off of a limited research, it appears to have maybe some potential, muscle building properties, or at the very least, muscle and strength preserving properties. As in, since, I'm either in sort of, I'm eating in an energy balance, or I'm eating in a little bit slight calorie deficit, then to preserve, or in the hopes of preserving my strength and muscle mass, I take this supplement. Since the research seems to support that there might be some potential in its ability to preserve strength and muscle mass, given, let's say, a calorie deficit, or just even overall, if you're in a calorie surplus. It might be some strength preserving supplement, or actually, muscle and strength promoting supplement. But again, the evidence is like really not all that strong, like low to at most medium quality evidence, in my opinion. So we're just skipping out on the deadlifts. And also, thank you so much for sticking around for as long as you can. Super appreciate it. Any support is, in any fashion, is appreciated. When just skipping out on the deadlifts for stream be better than not doing workout stream at all? Maybe. I don't know. I do occasional home workouts, but I mostly go to my public gym. As in, like, as much as I enjoy workout streams, I don't fully enjoy home workouts. And so it's like it's a cost benefit analysis of like, yeah, I love streaming my workouts, but I love streaming my, actual workouts, and not home workouts that I mostly just do for like maintenance, or like their stretching routines. I haven't done any workout for 4 months. Do you think I will start over the progress? Oh, and you never have to apologize. Like, you've been around for a while, Doffy. First of all, welcome. But you've been around for a while. And, like, I think you've apologized before if you're English. And as far as I can tell, like, everything that you said is perfectly legible and understandable to me. But absolutely not. Your progress will not be lost. Like, yes, you should not expect that your first day back is, you're going to be 100% to where you were. But let's just say, to get back to where you were before the break, it'll be like much less time, like exponentially less time. And easier said than done, but don't let that discourage you from getting back into it whenever you feel ready. Breaks are not a bad thing. And pretty much a relationship to the gym or physical fitness is a roller coaster ride, where I've taken breaks, and I've taken breaks both voluntarily and involuntarily to recover from, actual illness. And like, I think you'll be surprised at how quickly you'll bounce back. But again, whenever you're ready, just, gotta show up. But again, easier said than done. Yeah, and the peer review, another scientist peer review, and shout out to them. Let's see if I can do this properly. I believe that should be, yeah, their YouTube channel. The peer review has a YouTube channel. That's where they create their content. If you're not subscribed to them, you definitely should be. I actually didn't go to the gym on holiday for a month. Came back, and I do know why, or at least I don't know for sure. But like, I think that's pretty standard, and that happens to me. And this is one of the reasons why I cover overtraining syndrome. You know, I went through that. Where again, overtraining is a thing. And I think a very too often overlooked thing. Even though we don't know a lot about it, or we definitely don't have a perfect understanding of overtraining, or even good ways of actually diagnosing it. But I suspect that you might have been overtrained, and you needed some actual recovery, and then you bounced back. You literally bounced back even stronger. Where like, you know, again, easier said than done. And even I know these things, and I'm kind of like prone to overtraining myself. And even though, like, you know, I know I know a decent amount of the overtraining research, and I still sometimes, you know, I walk that line of being overtrained, where like, given the fact that I know my body pretty well, and I sort of know when I'm sort of like venturing into that overtraining territory, it's like, yeah, I have to make an effort to like pull back, and like make sure that I'm getting adequate recovery. And then once I do, it always happens that same as you, Bob Marley, I always bounce back like even stronger, and I hit like new PRs. I mean, that's, you know, sort of a somewhat ideal scenario, but not actually going into the fully overtrained, you know, scenario. It's all a balance. And that's why I also like complain about my sleep, because like, at least for me personally, the first sign of overtraining for me is like my sleep just like really degrades in like more ways than one. So covering this particular supplement that again I actually take, where it's at, it's shown, in addition to what the current evidence suggests in terms of strength or muscle preserving, or maybe strength and muscle promoting, it might have an also dual beneficial effect, maybe staving off dementia. But again, there's a little bit of a grain of salt to take to this, because I believe this was a mouse study, if I remember correctly. But researchers investigated the effect of the bodybuilding supplement HMB on Alzheimer's disease markers in mice. Yeah. And it is fairly expensive, where, at least for me, like a month's supply is like $40 to $50 Canadian. So I would say definitely not cheap. HMB improved cognitive ability and reduced the buildup of amyloid plaques in mouse models of Alzheimer's. But again, these are mouse models, and it's mouse model of Alzheimer's. Further studies are needed to see how these findings may apply to humans. Alzheimer's disease is the most common neurodegenerative condition worldwide, and the most common kind of dementia. As the global population ages, cases of Alzheimer's are expected to increase by 2050, well, pretty much about a doubling in the next, 30 years or so. Research is ongoing to develop treatments and prevention strategies for Alzheimer's. There is currently no cure for the condition. And then one study found that a bodybuilding protein supplement called beta-hydroxy beta-methylbutyric acid, or HMB, may protect against age-related cognitive decline in rats. HMB is available as an over-the-counter supplement and is generally considered safe to use. But again, the evidence, even just the evidence here of like mouse and rat studies, obviously, not the highest quality, or maybe not applicable to humans. But even like the human studies, more in that bodybuilding realm, don't appear all that strong. But maybe my information is out of date. I actually haven't looked recently. Like, once I started taking the supplement like 5 or 6 years ago, that's when I did the research. There may very well be higher quality evidence that has been published since. Oh yeah, and absolutely taking the full-time off deal can be 1,000% empathize with that. It is actually easier for me to like go to the gym than to like take time off, personally. Understanding more about how HMB affects cognitive decline could aid the development of Alzheimer's treatment and prevention strategies. And recently, researchers examined the effects of HMB on mouse models of Alzheimer's. And the study was published in Cell Reports. And maybe in a future stream, I'll actually go over that study. But yeah, HMB improves brain plasticity, which that appears to be, ideally an important component to preserve as you age. But, if I remember correctly, like, essentially, brain plasticity after a certain age, I think it's around 40, 45, but don't quote me on that. But I think around that age, that's when, brain plasticity, fairly significantly declines as you age. The researchers began by by studying the effects of adding HMB to cultured mouse hippocampal neurons, and these would be the neurons or the hippocampus, actually responsible for memory, as they say here, linked to memory formation and retrieval. It is among the first areas of the brain that are damaged in Alzheimer's, and if anything, I think that's the prime. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert on Alzheimer's, but I'm pretty decently familiar. But I think the hippocampus is largely the area that is affected by Alzheimer's. Ultimately, the researchers found that HMB significantly increased the density of dendritic spines, small protrusions from neurons that help them communicate with each other. Larger and more dense dendritic spines indicate better functioning neuronal circuits. They further found that HMB increased levels of various neurotrophic factors that are known to aid neuronal function. So maybe, you might be cultivating an environment that is, let's say, better for the nerves or neuronal function, as they say. These include BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, known to stimulate the growth and differentiation of neurons and synapses, and CREB, which regulates gene expression and is important for dopaminergic neurons. The researchers noted that these changes mean that HMB improves hippocampal plasticity, at least in cultured hippocampal neurons from mice. So this is essentially, at least based off of how they're phrasing it here, an in vitro study, as in it's not actually, as far as I can tell, again, based off how they're phrasing it, they're not using live mice, but these are basically just cells from the hippocampus of mice. So essentially cells in a dish, or specific cells in a dish that are coming from mice. Enhanced learning and memory with HMB. So the researchers next sought to see how their findings translate to live mice. So yeah, that totally makes sense. That tracks with, whatever. Overall experimental design of starting with in vitro of hey, how do the cells behave in a dish? And then from there, going into the actual mouse model. To do so, they orally administered HMB to mouse models of Alzheimer's for a month, which, this is mice. I believe their lifespan is a couple of years. Assuming it's about 24 months, they're giving it for 1 out of 24, or about 5% or a little bit less than 5% of their lifespan. Similarly to the cell cultures, HMB increased hippocampal plasticity in the live mice, as evidenced by increased numbers of neurotrophic factors and dendritic spines. The researchers also investigate how HMB affected memory and learning via a maze test. They actually tried to, see if there's any effects in performance. In doing so, they found that HMB improved performance among Alzheimer's mouse models, indicating that the supplement enhances learning and memory. The researchers next investigate how HMB affects the buildup of amyloid beta plaques in the hippocampus, which is it's thought or hypothesized, although I think some of this recently being questioned, that this is thought or hypothesized to be one of the main drivers, or one of the primary mechanisms that's driving, Alzheimer's progression. They found that oral administration of HMB significantly decreased amyloid beta levels in the hippocampus and cortex, the brain's outer surface, which plays a key role in learning, reasoning, and problem solving. From further tests, the researchers found that HMB exerts its cognitive effects by interacting with peroxisome proliferator activated receptor alpha, or PPAR alpha, a signal receiver in the brain that helps metabolize fatty acids. Mouse models of Alzheimer's lacking PPAR alpha did not experience the same cognitive benefits as those with the receptor. And here's where I'm pretty I'm pretty set on buying a tablet that I can start drawing on. I want to start drawing some of these things to hopefully make it make better sense. But limitations, as always, there is no perfect study. That's something that I always try to emphasize. Where, there's pretty much limitations to every piece of research that's published out there. Medical News Today spoke with Dr. Howard Pratt, psychiatrist and board-certified medical director at Community Health of South Florida, who was not involved in the study about its limitations. One limitation is that the mice's memory was assessed based on their ability to navigate through mazes. Now, HMB is also known to increase muscle strength. We cannot rule this out as a factor in the mice's improved performance. Yeah, interesting. That totally makes sense, or something to take note of. And again, this is pretty much the reason why I take this supplement, where, again, for its purported, again, based off of fairly limited evidence, that it either preserves muscle strength or increases it. Dr. Thomas Gutt, Associate Chair of Medicine at Staten Island University Hospital, who was not involved in the study, noted, however, that due to variance in how Alzheimer's presents in humans, there is no guarantee that HMB could benefit all Alzheimer's patients, even if similar findings can be produced in clinical trials. So could HMB be used as an oral supplement for Alzheimer's? Dr. Gutt, which, pretty somewhat fitting name, that HMB had potential as a treatment for Alzheimer's. Based on studies in mice, it's been found that HMB can help reduce some of the findings that are commonly associated with Alzheimer's disease and memory loss. HMB has been found to reduce the presence of certain plaque deposits, as well as improve potential connections within critical areas of the brain. Dr. Swirlow, meanwhile, noted that one of the key findings from this study is the idea that energy metabolism may control the buildup of proteins as opposed to the other way around. Accordingly, treatments targeting brain energy metabolism may impact the brain in Alzheimer's more than treatments that directly target the plaques. And I think this is also another kind of I think the multiple hypotheses out there of, let's say, what is driving disease progression is Alzheimer's. And who knows, maybe there's multiple mechanisms at play. I try to follow the research decently closely. But I know this is, at the end of the day, we don't actually fully know conclusively what is causing or driving Alzheimer's. There's multiple hypotheses, and pretty much, I think virtually all of them, or most of them, are active areas of research. But yeah, this energy metabolism thing, I know is an alternative hypothesis. If an oral supplement of HMB is proven to be either preventative or a treatment for dementia, it would help improve outcomes for dementia patients as well as the quality of life for their families. And also, Medical News Today also spoke with Dr. Russell Swerdlow, neurologist and co-director of the University of Kansas Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, not involved in this study. Extrapolating findings from mouse models to humans is always tricky, absolutely, but there are sometimes important lessons. Perhaps the lesson here is that energy-related metabolism not only plays an important role in brain function, but also profoundly affects Alzheimer's associated features like amyloid plaques. Okay. So, how to reduce dementia risk? While we don't know the cause of dementia, there are things you can do to reduce your risk of it. So, ways to reduce, such as stopping smoking, or if you do smoke, getting your blood pressure under control, checking yourself for diabetes and getting treatment if you have it, having a healthy, balanced diet, and when it comes to dementia, the earlier that you treat it, the better. So while we can't yet stop its progression, medications are available that can mask its effects. So if you have symptoms or are alerted by close ones that you may show signs of it, don't delay in seeking diagnosis and getting treatment included. And there have been multiple, at least recently, I'm sure there's a mountain of research published about Alzheimer's daily, but obviously, I can't follow that, or I can't follow every single field. But even, again, just yesterday, where, again, I think I covered research just last week about, actively developing, tests, or diagnostic tests that can hopefully potentially either screen or diagnose Alzheimer's earlier. Since, again, currently, I think, the only real kind of like sort of official way to diagnose Alzheimer's is unfortunately, like post-mortem after they've sadly passed away, where through essentially autopsy of their brain or examining their actual brain, and you actually like definitively diagnose Alzheimer's. And that is like one of the challenges of like, hey, how do we actually detect it earlier? Since as the other article wrapped up, the earlier that you can either screen or detect dementia, and you can actually intervene earlier, then just like the better your chances. But I'm not going to cover this right now. I'm probably going to cover it on a future stream. And a couple other shorter stories before getting into the main topics. And I'm going to try and like somewhat smoothly transition into it. Even one drink a day tied to increased blood pressure in healthy adults. This doesn't address your question, discount Seth Rogen. But like, I actually do quite a bit of research on alcohol, just because I think, I think we've known the health effects for a while, but I think more and more we're like finding out more and more from the research, like just how potentially not good for your health that it is, and that even Canada has recently revised its alcohol intake guidelines. They've essentially reduced them in terms of like, I think basically the closer that you can get to zero, the better. And that, there's almost no safe level of alcohol consumption, or pretty much like the minimum dose possible. So drinking just one alcoholic beverage a day is enough to raise blood pressure in healthy adults. Results of a dose-response meta-analysis. A vexing question has been whether usual intake of small amounts of alcohol is associated with a higher level of blood pressure. They identified a continuous, more or less linear association with no evidence of a threshold for the association. Study co-author Paul Welton, medical doctor with institution, told the heart.org, Medscape Cardiology, for systolic blood pressure, the most important blood pressure risk indicator for cardiovascular disease, association was robust, being present in both men and women and in both North America as well as Asia, Welton noted. Based on the results, the lower the better, and no consumption even better, as we do not find any indication that human health may benefit from consumption of very small amounts of alcohol. But, it's all risk versus benefit. I know definitely for some, maybe many, majority, I don't know, just like whatever. There's obviously the potential beneficial effects of whatever, just hopefully added enjoyment to your life. But there's always like a fine balance to have there, where like I know many people enjoy just a glass of whatever alcohol or wine with a meal that presumably enhances the meal or enhances their experience of the meal. And so it's like I'm sure there's a place for that. Like even like I'm reading this book, or I guess I should say I'm listening to this book. Yeah, this one I'm listening currently, about halfway through, by a physician, and they pretty much, they come to overall the same conclusion that like, yeah, there doesn't appear to be really any safe amount of alcohol consumption, at least when it comes to the health. But they admit to themselves that they still occasionally drink alcohol. It's like, yeah, they enjoy it, and there's something to be said for doing things that you enjoy. I don't think you want to fully deprive yourself of things that you enjoy, but hopefully you can just like dose it properly, or at least take into account some healthy dosing schedule. Clearly, alcohol is not the only or necessarily the main determinant of high blood pressure, and the effects of small intakes of alcohol emerging from our pooled analysis were certainly not biologically as relevant and meaningful as those induced by high intakes, Vincetti added. The study was published July 31st in Hypertension. Researchers analyzed data from 7 large observational studies conducted in the US, Korea, and Japan, involving about 20,000 adults. majority men, 65%. And like, yeah, this is observational. So, you know, again, a little bit of a caveat there, or like an asterisk. Like, you know, there's clear drawbacks or limitations to observational studies, but this is not to say that they're meaningless. Participants ranged in age from 20 years to early 70s at baseline and were followed for a median of 5.3 years. None of the participants had previously been diagnosed with hypertension or other cardiovascular disease, diabetes, liver disease, alcoholism, or binge drinking. Compared with non-drinkers, systolic blood pressure was 1.25 millimeters per mercury higher in adults who consumed an average of 12 grams of alcohol per day, rising to 4.9 millimeters per mercury in adults consuming an average of 48 grams of alcohol per day. So, well, yeah, pretty much like 4 times more. For reference, in the US, 12 ounces of regular beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounce shot of distilled spirits contains about 14 grams of alcohol. So they're consuming about 4 drinks per day, like these definitions of drinks. Diastolic blood pressure was 1.14 millimeters per mercury higher in adults, an average of 12 grams per alcohol. So yeah, roughly the same trend for both systolic and diastolic blood pressure. Subgroup analyses by gender showed an almost linear association between baseline alcohol intake and systolic blood pressure changes in men and women, and for diastolic blood pressure in men, while in women there was an inverted U-shape association. From a blood pressure perspective, best to avoid alcohol intake. This is what the WHO recommends. If someone is clearly already drinking alcohol and does not want to stop doing so, minimizing alcohol consumption is desirable. Many guidelines recommend not starting to drink alcohol, but in those already drinking alcohol, consumption of 2 or less standard drinks per day for men and 1 or less standard drinks of alcohol per day for women, which I think this is what I believe Canada revised to, or no, actually I think even less than that. I think it's like, 1 or 2 drinks like per week and not per day. Commenting on the study for theheart.org, Alberto Asherio with Harvard T. Chan School of Public Health, Boston, said it's been known for more than 30 years that alcohol intake is associated with increased systolic and diastolic blood pressure. The added value of this new study is a refinement of the estimate of the dose response. Asherio noted that moderate alcohol consumption is associated with a modest increase in risk of cancer, but in spite of the adverse association with blood pressure, with a potentially beneficial effect on cardiovascular disease. However, the causality of the latter association has been questioned, but there is no consensus on this. Also weighing in, Timothy Brennan, MD, Master's in Public Health, Chief of Clinical Services for the Addiction Institute of Mount Sinai, blah, 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 said this new study represents yet another piece of evidence suggesting that there is simply no healthy amount of alcohol use in humans. Which, like, yeah, I think the narrative is changing pretty quickly when it comes to alcohol. Where, again, there's obviously like a place for it in terms of doing things that you enjoy, but, hopefully you're informed on the potential risks. Where I think even just like 10, 15 years ago, kind of like at least the narrative that I sort of observed was just like, low consumption is whatever, either neutral or healthy. And I think we're finding out more and more that even just like low dose, there's some potential risks, maybe not like major, but some risk. Even small amounts of alcohol intake can have negative health effects, as demonstrated in this study. There is still a widely held belief among people that drinking in moderation is good for you, right? That is the narrative just like 10 years ago. And I think that still persists today. It is becoming more and more clear that this is simply not the case. As health authorities grapple with drinking recommendations, additional data sets like these will be helpful. No specific funding, no relevant disclosures. So yeah, I think research like this, again, as long as people are informed, they can do what they want. And, maybe this narrative that, low levels of alcohol intake or even moderate amounts are potentially healthy or like not that bad, maybe contributing to this particular trend. unfortunately and sadly. Where this was published like a week ago, or about 2 weeks ago, where women increasingly dying of alcohol-related causes. Where I think, generally speaking, if I remember like the data correctly, when it comes to alcohol-related deaths, you know, largely men that experience that or suffering from that. But it seems like women are like catching up to them, or like the rate at which women are dying from alcohol-related causes appears to be increasing at a greater rate than men dying from alcohol-related causes. As in, it seems like, you know, obviously men are still, unfortunately and sadly, dying from alcohol-related causes, but it seems to be kind of like a consistent rate, and like, again, women just appear to be catching up to them. A review by Mayo Clinic researchers found that women are increasingly affected by liver disease linked to alcohol and develop more severe disease at lower levels of drinking than do men. Among other factors, the researchers said that an increase in obesity, which can worsen the liver-damaging effects of alcohol, is a contributor. Expert perspectives. Overall, recent research is showing that not only are women drinking more, but potentially are developing more problems later on as a result of the alcohol, said Mark Kaplan, Professor Emeritus of Social Welfare at the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs. He conducted the study finding growing alcohol use involvement in women's death by suicide. I think this new study is strong, he said. In future research, we should focus on some of the issues that may have to do with social circumstances. In particular, he said, research should examine the increase in alcohol-involved death found in the new study among American Indian or Alaska Native women. While the overall annual increase was 14.7% for the years 2018 to 2020, the rate among American Indian or Alaska Native women was about 23% annually. While the new study and others find the gap between the sexes is narrowing for alcohol-related complications, unfortunately, alcohol use disorder and alcohol-related deaths are increasing in both men and women, said Camille Kezer, MD, gastroenterology and hepatology fellow at Mayo Clinic, who led the review on sex differences in alcohol-linked liver disease. However, she said, we know that there are risks of alcohol that are unique to women for a variety of reasons, including differences in metabolism and the impact of hormones, as well as the increasing prevalence of obesity and bariatric surgery in women. Bariatric surgery has been linked with an increase in alcohol consumption and disorder in some studies. This is essentially, if I remember correctly, like weight loss surgery. Kezer's advice to women: limit alcohol intake to 1 drink per day or less. If you are concerned about your alcohol intake, you should seek help. Healthcare providers are committed to helping their patients recognize and treat alcohol-related disorders. Oh, did I start off on the second page? That's a gross oversight. Although, let me just double check. Okay, well, we're going in reverse order. Women in the US are dying of alcohol-related causes at a much faster rate than are US men, according to a new study that tracked these deaths for 20 years. The most dramatic rise occurred in the last 3 years, covered by the study. From 2018 to 2020, there was an increase of 14.7% per year in alcohol-related deaths in women, said study researcher Ibrahim Farai, assistant professor of population health and director of the health science program at Hofstra University in Hampstead, New York. While alcohol-related deaths in men also increased greatly during that same 3-year period, it was less than in women at 12.5% per year. Researchers have known for several years that the sex gap related to alcohol use and complications is narrowing. Women are drinking more, engaging in more high-risk drinking, and increasingly developing alcohol use disorder, Farai said. However, we know very little about the trends in alcohol-related deaths. Using a CDC database that spanned the years 1999 to 2020, so, you know, pretty much 22-decade timeline, Karaye and his co-researchers analyzed files that identified underlying causes of death. During those years, more than 605,000 alcohol-attributed deaths were identified. Overall, men were still nearly 3 times more likely to die from alcohol-related issues than women were. However, the rate of alcohol-related deaths in women increased steadily, and in the latest years studied more greatly than in men. We found there were 3 different segments of trends in women. The rates increased slowly, then steadily picked up speed. For instance, so from 1999 to 2007, we found that mortality rates from alcohol were increasing by 1% per year in women. And in 2007 to 2018, the rate increased 4.3% per year. That was a big one, but not as phenomenal as the most recent, the most concerning. From 2018 to 2020, the rate increased 14.7% per year in women compared to 12.5% per year for men. You had like this 1999 to 2007, you had like this quadrupling, or rather from 2007 to 2018, this quadrupling, and then pretty much like a tripling from like 2018 to 2020. So pretty, at the end of the day, we're going from 1% to about 15% from the timeline that they analyzed. The findings stayed strong, Karai said, even when the researchers excluded data from the year 2020, the first pandemic year. Which, like, yeah, I believe, again, if I remember correctly, like, during the beginning stages, or like, I guess the first few years of the pandemic, you had this large spike in both alcohol consumption and, unfortunately, opioid consumption and deaths. Our study is descriptive. It tells us the what, but not the why, Raya said. However, we can speculate based on what's known and previous research. Women are drinking at higher rates than before and tend to develop more alcohol-related complications than men do. Women have lower concentrations of the enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase, which helps break down and metabolize alcohol. We know that in women, the concentration of fat to water is higher. That also leads to a possibly higher concentration of alcohol, Raya said. The study findings point to the need for more research to focus on causes for the rise in women. Studies on the use of medication for alcohol use disorder need to represent women more equitably, he said. Although recent research has found that the proportion of suicides, sadly, that involved alcohol has also increased for women of all age groups, not men. In research published in 2022, researchers analyzed more than 115,000 deaths by suicide from 2003 to 2018 and found the proportion of those deaths involving alcohol at a level above the legal limit increased annually for women in all age groups, but not for men. So, I think this, unfortunately and sadly, overlaps, or rather intersects quite well this research of like, hey, even small amounts of alcohol consumption, there is some risk associated with that, and that, like, yeah, the negative effects of alcohol appear to be amplified in women, and that the trend in women in terms of alcohol-related deaths definitely going in the wrong direction, and trending like very much the wrong direction. But yeah, hopefully with more research we can actually, as they say, find out why and actually address that. Okay, so before, yeah, how am I gonna do this? So there's this research here about ADHD. I think I'm going to cover this right before I get into one of the other main topics of essentially misinformation on TikTok, or like, no surprise, social media, where this was published I think last year, actually. So not the most up-to-date research, but I still think it's pretty cool, since recently I've been covering a decent amount of social media research. And I have even more research about social media. This was definitely published recently, I think in the past 2 weeks, about, how does social media affect election campaigns, or like, does it affect election campaigns? But this one, super interesting, at least to me, of like, hey, people are clearly getting, news and information from social media, thus including TikTok. I'm like, so what is the quality of the information? Can we assess the quality? And from there, like, what is the actual, what's misinformation, or what proportion is misinformation, and what proportion is actually accurate information that's beneficial. But put this on the back burner now and cover the first main topic, which is this LK-99 superconductor equation in science, where this is where I'm relying on other experts to figure out what's going on, because like I'm not a physicist, I'm not like a materials scientist or like chemist or physicist or engineer, and so it's like I'm in no position I could dissect the LK-99 research or like assess it in any way, and so I'm relying on other researchers to hopefully do their due diligence and pretty much suss out what's going on there. And that appears to be what is happening, where other researchers are trying to replicate what the LK-99 research group did, or trying to actually replicate LK-99 and what it's purported to be doing. And this preprint here, okay, out of India, or an Indian research group, it looks like they tried to basically reproduce what was published, and this is a preprint about that, of their attempts to reproduce it. But even then, like I said, I'm in no position to dissect this. I'm just more or less gonna like read the abstract and like the discussion, or maybe like a little bit of the discussion, because I have there's probably like some sort of flaws with this research, but I can't actually tease out what it is, or like I can't assess how good their replication efforts were. They're saying they're trying to replicate what was done, but whether that's actually true or not, like I actually can't tell. I'm literally relying on them to hopefully accurately report what it is that they're doing, or that they're doing their actual due diligence. But this is a preprint, it's not peer reviewed, so again, there's also a grain of salt associated with this. But the report of synthesis of modified lead apatite, or LK-99, with evidence of superconductivity at more than boiling water temperature, has steered the whole scientific community. There have been several failures to reproduce superconductivity in LK-99, albeit partial successes. Here, we continued our efforts to synthesize phase pure LK-99 with improved precursors. The process has been followed as suggested by Dukbe Lee et al., so other research group. The phase purity of each precursor is evidenced by powder X-ray diffraction and well fitted by Rietveld refinement. I have no idea what that is. The PXRD confirms the synthesis of phase pure polycrystalline LK-99 with lead apatite structure. So it seems like, from what I understand, based off what they're saying, they are saying that they are recreating, or like they're actually making, that material, the LK-99, and they're like confirming that it is actually that. And then it looks like they're going to like test it. Well, does it actually behave, as a superconductor under basically room temperature or ambient conditions? The freshly synthesized sample does not show any signature of superconductivity with respect to levitation on a magnet or vice versa. The magnetization measurements on squid show that LK-99 is diamagnetic at 280 Kelvin. And there is no sign of superconductivity in LK-99 at room temperature. Essentially a negative result. Or not reproducing what was originally reported about LK-99. The sample is highly resistive as well. Moreover, we have also performed the first principle calculations to investigate the electronic band structure of the LK-99 near Fermi level. Our study verifies that the copper-doped lead apatite, or LK-99, has bands crossing at Fermi level, indicating generation of strong correlation system. So yeah, it's like an overall negative result. Curious as to what they say in the discussion. In fact, they even have one. You know, they have some figures here, but I obviously am in no position to dissect or scrutinize any of the raw data. Totally outside of my field of expertise. So, what's the overall conclusion, or is there an actual formal I guess just with the conclusion. So, summarily, we have synthesized phase-pure precursors of LK-99, as confirmed by the Rietveld analysis of PXRD data. Further, we report successful synthesis of LK-99 following the same method as suggested in the references. The PXRD data and its Rietveld refinement of LK-99 show the shrinkage in lattice parameters, leading to a 0.18% volume contraction as compared to the parent compound lead apatite, which, again, this is all just jargon to me. That doesn't mean much. But the intriguing superconductivity as claimed in the original research appears to be elusive. Again, negative result. The as-prepared sample does not show any levitation on a permanent magnet. The isothermal magnetization measurements at 280K showed that the prepared sample is, though diamagnetic, but without any signatures of superconductivity. Although computational results support possible superconducting mechanism in LK-99, the experimental results reveal no superconductivity in LK-99. So again, this is a preprint, so not peer-reviewed yet, but this appears to be a negative result. But again, I can't comment on pretty much what they're actually doing. For all I know, they're not doing their due diligence, or they're not actually following the protocol of the original LK-99 publication. And I also found this Twitter thread that it appears to be another lab from Princeton also trying to replicate LK-99, and it appears like they're uploading their results or their findings. Where this is the Shoup lab, where it seems like they pretty much work on this type of stuff. So here is a link to our recent findings on LK-99, together with Princeton physics and another research group or researcher, and it looks like they're going to publish it as a preprint tomorrow. So, what are the overall summary of their findings? So 1, samples following the described synthesis are multi-phase, whatever that means. I can't comment on that. Single crystals of an apatite phase can be isolated and are transparent. Our SXRD solution agrees with published powder pattern. Copper doping and lead site seems not feasible based on formation energy calculations. And finally, even if we assume the copper dope structure to be correct, theory predicts for the given structure a magnetic ground state due to localized flat bands. Also, shout out to this research group or researcher who got the SRD structure so fast. So it seems like, what I can tell, this is like a negative result. For an overall, again, another negative result. So, not looking good, but again, still to be determined on what's going on with LK-99. But again, I'm relying on other experts to figure out what's going on, because again, this is not my field, and I just have to defer to hopefully the actual expert. So transitioning to the other sort of main topic in my title, or at least starting the transition to that. This research about ADHD and maybe a potentially better treatment for ADHD, where I think, typical standard treatment or conventional treatment for ADHD is some sort of stimulant. And this one appears to be a non-stimulant. Kind of like, arguably in the exact opposite direction. Or just, yeah, non-stimulant. I think, as far as I can tell, every treatment for, or every conventional treatment for ADHD, like, is in the stimulant category. This is arguably a brand new category of potential treatment, where I think this is still in the clinical trial phase, so not approved, but maybe on the pathway to approval. So the study included 35 children and 15 adults. Of these, 43% and 73.3% respectively were taking concurrent stimulants. Patients received mean doses of atomoxetine once daily, followed by viloxazine once daily after a 5-day washout. Am I also again starting on this? Yes. Go back to the first page. I don't know why I had both on the second page. So, children and adults with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder show greater improvement in symptoms with viloxazine extended release compared with treatment with atomoxetine, new research suggests. Investigators studied patients who started out taking atomoxetine and, after a washout period, initiated treatment with viloxazine. Participants' ADHD symptoms were assessed prior to initiation of each treatment and after 4 weeks. So it seems like they're comparing these two medications, or basically potentially new medication with the old or more conventional medication. I guess comparing the non-stimulant with the conventional stimulant medication. So, children and adults showed significantly larger improvement in inattentiveness and hyperactivity impulsivity when taking viloxazine versus atomoxetine, with almost all patients preferring the former to the latter, so preferring the non-stimulant. In addition, close to 1/2 of the study participants were taking a prior stimulant, and 85% were able to taper off stimulant treatment. Viloxazine's effects were also more rapid than were those of atomoxetine. It is timely to have a rapidly acting and highly effective non-stimulant option across the full spectrum of ADHD symptoms for both children and adults. In light of recent stimulant shortages and the new FDA boxed warnings regarding increased mortality associated with overuse of stimulants, study investigator Maxwell Z. Price, a medical student at Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine, told Medscape Medical News, which, you know, well, they're a medical student, but they're the study investigator. Well, I guess they should be in the best position to comment about it. Study co-author Richard L. Price, MD, told Medscape Medical News that the study was conducted to find a more acceptable alternatives to psychostimulant treatments for ADHD, which are currently considered the gold standard. Although they are effective, said Price, they are fraught with adverse effects, including appetite suppression, insomnia, exacerbation of mood disorders, anxiety, tics, or misuse. Atomoxetine, a non-stimulant option, has been around for a few decades and is often used in combination with a stimulant medication. However, he said, the drug has a mild effect, requires frequent dosage adjustment, takes a long time to work, and people have sourced on its utility, Price added. Like atomoxetine, viloxazine is a selective norepinephrine inhibitor that has been used as an antidepressant in Europe for 30 years. It was recently reformulated as an extended-release medication and approved by the FDA for pediatric and adult ADHD. However, unlike atomoxetine, viloxazine is associated with increased prefrontal cortex, 5-hydroxytryptamine, norepinephrine, and dopamine levels in vivo. So it seems like maybe an entirely different, or like, you know, significantly different mechanism of action. There appears to be a little bit of an overlap of, like, you know, some effect on norepinephrine, but based off how they're describing it here, and based off of what I know of conventional stimulants for ADHD, they don't really affect dopamine levels. Whereas this one, this viloxazine, does appear to be having some effect on dopamine levels. There have been no head-to-head trials comparing the two agents. However, even in head-to-head ADHD medication trials, The agents that are under investigation are typically compared in matched patients. Or actually, I think what I said might not be fully true. 1 second. Want to make sure that I'm not saying the wrong thing. Where's the wiki? Okay, no. Yeah. I figured I was wrong, because there are totally medications for ADHD that do affect dopamine. But they're just comparing it to that specific one. Going back to it. Yeah, so this atomoxetine, it's basically a selective norepinephrine inhibitor. It's in the antidepressant. Yeah, so it's not, essentially not one of the conventional ADHD medications. But like, yeah, conventional ADHD medications do appear to have, yeah, an effect. Dopamine. Glad I corrected that. So there have been no head-to-head trials comparing the two agents. However, even in head-to-head ADHD medication trials, the agents that are under investigation are typically compared in matched patients. The current investigators want to compare the two agents, whose insurers mandate a trial of generic atomoxetine prior to covering branded viloxazine. We wanted to find out whether patients taking atomoxetine for ADHD combined type would experience improvement in ADHD symptoms following voluntary open-label switch to viloxazine at price. The researchers studied 50 patients who presented with ADHD combined type and had no other psychiatric, medical, or substance-related comorbidities or prior exposure to atomoxetine or viloxazine. So yeah, sort of started reading this right off the bat. So 35 children, 15 adults, children mean age about 12 years old, and the adults about 30 years old. Of these, 43% and 73.3% respectively were taking concurrent stimulants. Patients received mean doses of atomoxetine once daily, followed by, so yeah, there's this washout period. And then at baseline, the pediatric ADHD rating scale 5 and the adult investigator symptoms rating scale were completed. Then again, after 4 weeks of treatment with atomoxetine, or upon early response or discontinuation due to side effects, whichever came first, and 5 days after discontinuing atomoxetine, which reestablished the baseline score, the same protocol was then repeated with viloxazine. So yeah, they first had this set of children and adults on, you know, that atomoxetine medication, the one that's sort of like that in that antidepressant class that has this effect on norepinephrine. And then, you know, they were on for a certain amount of time. Their symptoms were assessed. Well, they obviously established a baseline, and then they had them on the atomoxetine for a certain amount of time, 4 weeks, and then they assessed their symptoms again. And then there was that washout period, where they pretty much, it looks like they weren't really taking any treatment for 5 days, and then they were started on this new treatment, the viloxazine, where again, I'm sure, yeah, they reestablished that baseline score. It's like, yeah, these set of people, children and adults, they're getting 2 treatments, like essentially the stimulant treatment, and then this presumably what looks like this non-stimulant treatment. So at baseline, the total ADHD RS5 mean score was 40.3, plus or minus 10.3. Improvements at 4 weeks were greater in viloxazine versus atomoxetine, with scores of 13.9 versus 33.1 respectively. In inattention and hyperactivity impulsivity, the t-values were minus 8.57 and minus 9.87 respectively. Bunch of data. Yeah, the baseline scores obviously changing. So by 2 weeks, 86% of patients taking viloxazine reported a positive response versus 14% when taking atomoxetine. Side effects were lower in viloxazine versus atomoxetine, with a total of 36% of patients discontinuing treatment with atomoxetine due to side effects. That included gastrointestinal upset irritability, fatigue, and insomnia versus 4% who discontinued fluoxetine due to fatigue. So it seems like it has a much greater, it doesn't seem like, but it, has a much better side effect profile, even like pretty significantly. Where it's like about a third of patients with that atomoxetine were experiencing some sort of negative side effect, as opposed to like a pretty small single-digit percentage only had negative side effects. Almost all participants preferred fluoxetine over atomoxetine, and 85% were able to taper off stimulant treatment following stabilization on fluoxetine. These were not small differences, commented Richard Price. These were clinically and statistically meaningful differences. The findings could represent a paradigm shift for the field, because we always think of starting ADHD treatment with stimulants, but perhaps treatment with fluoxetine could help patients to avoid stimulants entirely, he suggested. So, real-world study. Commenting for Medscape Medical News, Greg Mattingly, MD, Associate Clinical Professor, Washington University, St. Louis, Missouri, called it a timely addition to the clinical literature, where for the first time ever, we have 2 non-stimulant options approved for adults with ADHD. This real-world clinic study yields many answers, said Mattingly, who is also the president-elect of the American Professional Society of ADHD and Related Disorders, and was not involved with the study. Simply put, this real-world study of 50 clinic patients found that fluoxetine ER had faster onset, was significantly more effective, and was preferred by 96% of patients as compared to atomoxetine, he said. Another intriguing part of the study that will be of high interest to both patients and providers was that of those initially treated concurrently with stimulant and fluoxetine ER, 85% were able to discontinue their stimulant medication. This group did not receive any specific money from... Okay. So, but there appears to be a lot of, let's say, financial disclosures. Or at least from this person. This Richard L. Price person. So it seems like they're using... Looks like this fluoxetine is approved for something else, but they're finding out that it has use. Do Colbury... Interesting. Previously marketed as an antidepressant. So it seems like maybe it was originally approved for depression. And they're finding out more and more that it has beneficial effects on ADHD. Okay, first described in 90, so this goes way back as an antidepressant. Okay. But yeah, I've totally never heard of it. I'm usually pretty familiar with antidepressant medications. So that's actually pretty cool. So like it is actually approved. It's just we're finding new purposes for it, which is super cool. And that essentially means that, you know, it's pretty well characterized, or at least, you know, more or less have a decent amount of understanding of how it works in this particular therapeutic context when it comes to depression. And now it's just a matter of like hopefully like optimizing it for ADHD, or seeing and determining like how beneficial is it for ADHD, and maybe some potential advantages over the conventional stimulant medications. So yeah, super cool, potentially super promising. Whereas they say here, this might be, you know, a better go-to as a starting point, as instead of starting off directly stimulants, starting off with a non-stimulant, especially given the fact that it appears to have a pretty good side effect profile, at least compared to, you know, what they tried here with the atomoxetine. So, with that, pretty cool research on ADHD. Although ADHD therapy and treatment, this is in the realm of ADHD information and information dissemination. So, as mentioned, this was published last year, 2022, and it's, you know, Canadian Journal of Psychiatry. And another reason why I'm covering this, because just a few streams ago, I covered this research about AI and essentially disinformation, or AI's potential for generating and maybe spreading disinformation and misinformation. Where in this particular study here, using GPT-3, I believe now we have GPT-4, if not maybe GPT-5, I don't know, but I have no doubt that that's probably in the pipeline. But basically, we have these large language models, and at least based off of this study here, GPT-3 had the ability to, as it says in the title, disinforms us better than humans, as it can generate tweets that contain misinformation, and the misinformation tweets appear to be better at disinforming us than actual humans that are generating misinformation and disinformation. So with that in mind, and further development of these large language models, and access to these large language models, and even in this research here, they close out essentially hinting at hey, maybe we should maybe regulate, or maybe hold off on public access to these tools, or maybe for the time being, maybe just limit it to researchers to find out, hopefully, as much of the negative ramifications or implications as possible. But regardless, at the end of the day, some sort of large language model, is already here, and better versions are in the pipeline. And obviously social media is here, and now we have multiple social media platforms, and many people are, not maybe the majority now, are using these social media platforms not only for their news, but to get information on actual medical or health topics. And so it's good to understand not only how people are consuming social media, but what is the actual content that is produced that they are potentially consuming. And this research directly addresses that, at least when it comes to ADHD. Social media platforms are a popular means of sharing medical information online. And, maybe a little bit of a spoiler, but in my opinion, what they find out is not so great, or doesn't look so great. And 1 second. Oh. I totally am missing a bunch. Thank you for calling that to my attention. Let me catch up with chat. I apologize. I didn't have the actual training thing where I was cutting. I was working out harder than ever, so I depleted my own iron stores and ended up with anemia. Drink. Yeah, you have to remind me which page. Obviously, I'm way behind. I'm half an hour behind. I see this timestamps. Okay, sorry. What unique crystal structure or composition attributes to the exceptional superconducting properties of the LK-99 superconductor? And do you think scientists might leverage this understanding for advancements in quantum computing? Okay, so I can't speak about the unique crystal structure or composition because I mostly know of crystal structures from these things, from my own let's say domain or discipline of proteins and those crystal structures. But let me just read this and make sure I fully understand what you're asking, and maybe I can provide some insight. But what unique crystal structure or composition attributes the exceptional superconducting properties of LK-99 superconductor? Do you think it's 97 leverages? So if in fact, like, it turns out to be true, here is where, like, it gets tricky, and this is where I need to rely again on other experts. Where I covered last stream, yeah, I covered last stream this article, somewhat recent, August 4th, where, it's a social media sensation, as, highlighted in the title, but, essentially, maybe it's overhyped, or like, is this actually revolutionary? I don't actually know, since I'm not a superconductor expert, or far from it. I'm a superconductor layperson. But they do consult, actual experts in this article, and even they say, right here. So this is from a researcher. They are a condensed matter experimentalist at, University of California, Davis. And they pretty much end up by saying, historically, progress in superconductivity has had tremendous benefits for basic science, but little in the way of everyday applications. There's no guarantee that a room temperature superconductor would be of practical use, Vishik says. But this is one person, this is one researcher and expert. And so it's like, do I actually know if that's true? Like, if I'm just going by social media and the hype in social media, it seems like the answer is yes. Like, if in fact it's true, this is like absolutely like completely revolutionary. And like will transform like so many things. But then I read this and I have, what seems to be an expert, or someone who's qualified to talk about these things, and appears to do research in that vein. And they're saying, well, hard to say, but so far, these advancements in superconducting haven't really translated, to practical applications, as they say. It seems like it's, great for basic science and in the research domain. When it comes to practical applications, doesn't seem to pan out. But again, I don't actually know. And I think that's more or less like, I tend to side with what the experts say. And so if what they're saying is true, I'm probably going to lean towards that. As in, they're probably right. I don't actually know. So yeah, that microscope pen, budget permitting, hopefully that's in the pipeline. And yeah, I definitely, that's a great movie reference. So it's really difficult to say. That's where, again, I'll say it over and over. Like, I am deferring to the experts. Yeah, thank you for calling attention, like the chat. That's, well, maybe that's some early signs of ADHD on my part. Or maybe that's, signs of early dementia and cognitive decline, where I don't think this ever happened before, but there's a first time for everything. But yeah, I think the chat now. Apologies for that. So, but yeah, I can't really comment on like the crystal structure of LK-99, unfortunately. I wish I could. I can only comment really on crystal structures about proteins. That is like essentially like right up my alley. Yeah, trying to get back on track. Totally gross oversight. On the chat. So, where was I? Yeah, social media platforms are a popular means of sharing medical information online. TikTok in particular is a relatively new social media platform that has seen rapid adoption by adolescents and young adults. becoming the most downloaded social media application in 2020, with more than 1 billion monthly active users. In particular, the popularity of the platform appears to have contributed to increased awareness of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, with some individuals seeking a diagnosis after watching videos about ADHD on the platform. The hashtag ADHD is currently the 7th most popular health-related hashtag on the platform. Although social media can reduce mental health stigma and improve health literacy, there is also concern about misinformation and the potential for illness, health anxiety, due to the volume of unmoderated, user-generated content online. For example, TikTok videos have been implicated in a recent rise of tic-like behaviors in adolescents, and it is thought that exposure to tic-related videos is responsible for this phenomenon. So I've seen some of the research casually on this phenomenon where, some people are implicating or pointing fingers at TikTok in, let's say, this, what might look like a rise or increase in ADHD. And yeah, there's papers now published sort of trying to look at that phenomenon of, like, people consuming content on TikTok. And then as a result of consuming that TikTok, there appears to be some sort of like tic that's induced, or some sort of like ADHD like behavior that's induced. But the research, at least limited research that I've seen, pretty mixed. Additionally, social media platforms use proprietary algorithms that focus on increasing user engagement and may promote videos that do not necessarily reflect accurate health information. And again, I think as I was sort of just about to say, what's going to be shown here doesn't seem all that promising in the context of ADHD. And then I think, obviously, I don't know for sure, but I think it's probably going to hold true when it comes to like health and, well, fitness related information. Many people are consuming fitness content, even myself included, on social media. And obviously, I don't have any hard data, but at least from my own personal experience, just looking and observing at fitness content on social media, like the vast majority seems to be like really poor quality, or like falls in that category of misinformation. And so, yeah, what's shown here when it comes to ADHD, not that surprising. Oh, that's pretty true. Welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. Yeah, so, and this social contagion, like, effect, or at least, like, that term, it's, even though, like, I know you're making a pun. But did I save it? I think I saved it. No, I didn't. I'm gonna have to dig it up again. But all that to say, there is research on the TikTok phenomenon, or that social contagion phenomenon. So, a recent systematic review found that the prevalence of health misinformation was high across almost all social media platforms. Not surprising. With TikTok being a relatively new social media platform, there's little research on the quality and accuracy of its content. As a result, there have been increasing calls for more research to understand the potential implications of TikTok on health information dissemination. Recent studies examining how TikTok videos have found that misinformation was common for a variety of medical topics, including those about acne, diabetes, and cosmetic surgery. To our knowledge, no study has examined the quality of mental health information disseminated on TikTok. Thus, our objective was to assess the quality of medical information in the most popular TikTok videos related to ADHD. So, they're highlighting here, there's been past research, sort of what I touched upon, on, people are consuming content on social media in a variety of domains, especially on health and fitness. And it looks like, as they're highlighting from the past research, doesn't look all that promising. Of like, yeah. As they say here, where was it? Yeah, recent studies examining TikTok videos have found that misinformation was common for a bunch of topics, actual health-related topics like acne, diabetes, cosmetic surgery. And I'll probably dig these up, these references later. Visit them. Or probably cover them on stream. So I'm not going to, dissect their methodology for this paper. But, just going through their overall workflow. But, they basically, no surprise, they searched, the TikTok mobile app. And they had the results sorted by a TikTok algorithm. And then they video assessed for eligibility. So there was some, filtering effect. Where they originally started off with, 408 videos. And then they filtered out a bunch. And then they ended up with 100. As in, they filtered out 308 out of the 408, which left 100. And then video classification and analysis. And so they scored them. So, here's where maybe for some people, this will be, controversial. How do you sort information into categories of, accurate versus misinformation and inaccurate? Well, for now, we're using humans. We're hopefully using expert humans. In this case, experts on ADHD, or that they have some qualifications in assessing medical information when it comes to ADHD. And so a human is going in and it's like, hey, is this video or this content on TikTok, actually good quality or bad quality, essentially. So here are some of the examples, illustrative examples of misleading, useful, and personal experience videos. So they classify pretty much the video characteristics. And here are their classifications. So straight out misleading. So remember, as a result of all their filtering, they ended up with 100 videos, essentially classified. And so 52 out of the 100 were categorized as misleading. 27 out of the 100 were characterized as personal experience. And then 21 as useful. So pretty much a little bit more than half are characterized as misleading. So they have this other table, illustrative examples of misleading, useful, and personal experience videos. So here are the misleading videos. The ADHD paralysis, as an ADHD symptom where the brain physically won't let me do anything, and sometimes nothing causes it. So maybe some sort of, roadblock. Or yeah, ADHD paralysis. Yeah, physically won't let me do anything. So maybe some sort of state of temporary paralysis induced by ADHD. They're characterizing this as misleading. A video stating that ADHD is equally common between girls and boys, and that ADHD symptoms only intensify with onset of puberty. And a video stating that individuals with ADHD lack object permanence. That seems pretty extreme. Video stating that anxiety shivers, random noise making, and being competitive are symptoms of ADHD. And a video stating that ADHD are only either understimulated or overstimulated and lack dopamine. So here are the useful videos. Auditory processing disorder can be a comorbid disorder with ADHD, and that a medical and/or audiological assessment is required for this to be diagnosed. This is useful. Individuals with ADHD may need extra time to find missing items, have anxiety about future tasks, and suggests that proper treatment can improve quality of life. Yeah, that is my understanding. But I'm definitely not an expert on ADHD. ADHD may have sleep disturbances and comorbidities such as delayed sleep phase syndrome. And ADHD signs and symptoms such as daydreaming, sleep disturbances, and school difficulties, with a recommendation to see a mental health professional if the viewer is wondering about ADHD. And then ADHD signs and symptoms such as needing others to repeat information, forgetfulness, or struggling to complete tasks. And then the personal experience videos. ADHD symptoms such as being distracted while doing tasks and losing items. An individual describing their own personal experience of inattentive ADHD symptoms, including self-doubt, feeling overwhelmed, thoughts of procrastinating, and individual describing their personal experience of being forgetful, easily distracted, and also experiencing stigma related to the diagnosis of and ADHD describing their own personal experience of having difficulty completing individual projects and preference for group projects, and ADHD showing a recording of themselves being distracted while performing a task. So, these are like, I can totally see these personal experiences as useful. It seems like they're kind of putting these as neutral. These are kind of, well, these are stories. These are, as they say, these are personal experiences. So I don't know if you can really ever characterize someone's personal experience as, misinformation. Not my call to make. But it seems like they are creating this separate category of personal experience. I'm sure there's some overlap of like someone sharing their personal experience can be spreading misinformation. Like, I guess that's tricky, or at least, I'm not an expert on ADHD, but that seems like it would be hard to classify. Of like someone just sharing like, hey, this is my daily life, and I have ADHD. But I guess, once it's clear that it's misleading, or like straight up misinformation, or they're like making an actual claim, like this seems pretty specific of like, yeah, ADHD symptom where the brain physically won't let me do anything, and sometimes nothing causes it. That's pretty explicit. So, what are their overall findings? In this analysis of popular TikTok videos about ADHD, there were over 2.8 million views per video. Each video was shared on average 31,000 times. So, lots of people, I don't know the metrics, but like, since TikTok is short form content, I kind of assume, I don't actually know, but I kind of assume that, someone starts a TikTok video, they are likely to finish it. As in, these 2.8 million views is probably mostly reflective of what people are actually watching. But since I essentially don't use TikTok, I don't actually know how most people consume TikTok. But I just kind of assume that if a video starts, they're probably watching the entire thing, or the majority of it. And so, like, yeah, basically a lot of people are consuming this content, or at least being exposed to it. Approximately half of the videos analyzed were misleading, with non-healthcare providers uploading most of these videos. So essentially, not professionals. Where, yeah, these are non-healthcare providers. And even then, that's a broad category. But like, yeah, hopefully, like a nurse is hopefully providing more accurate information about ADHD than someone who is not a healthcare professional. Yeah, absolutely. At least in my opinion, TikTok appears to be pretty crazy and out there. Even though like I'm on social media, but I tried to limit it. Maybe unsuccessfully limit my consumption of social media content, where like I sort of have issues with Twitter and Instagram, and so if I have issues with that, like I don't even want to like open the box of TikTok. So there was substantial agreement among raters on the classification of the videos as useful, misleading, or personal experience. Right, because again, they're classifying these things. They're actual, hopefully experts, or almost certainly experts involved in this research, are like evaluating the information. Our study is the first to show that misleading videos about ADHD are being widely disseminated and viewed on TikTok. These findings are in line with previous studies of TikTok videos that have found high rates of misinformation for medical conditions, including acne and diabetes, like they mentioned in introduction. Our results are also similar to a study by Thapa et al. That analyzed YouTube videos about ADHD and found that 38% of analyzed videos were misleading, and only 5% were useful. Okay, interesting. So it's like a better number than TikTok, at least on YouTube. So like when it comes to ADHD information, you know, it looks like YouTube is marginally better when it comes to like less misinformation. But then when it comes to actual useful information, like we're at 5%, as in 5% were actually, at least based off of their assessment, 5% was considered useful. The study also found that first-person or personal experience videos received the highest engagement, that is likes and views, while misleading videos were the most common. Interesting. And it's sort of a little bit reflective of what I covered last stream. Again, going back to social media research of, if I can find it. Of like, yeah, this study, pretty much, you know, no surprise, basically negative stuff on Twitter is shared more, but like the content that is actually produced, like it's mostly actually positive content that is produced. At least if you're looking at public figures, you know, the ones that were verified when verification was a thing, I think it's broken down nicely in this pie chart. And of like in green, green is like, you know, the positive information or like the positive tweets. But then, you know, what is actually shared, like when a public figure creates positive content, well, it doesn't get as much traction, or it's not shared and retweeted as much as, you know, the minor negative content that they make. So it's a little bit reflective of that, of, yeah, what is generated on TikTok is like this misleading information, but what actually gets the most traction is that first-person personal experience, or that's what gets the engagement, which I guess that's somewhat promising. Like I think it would be even more concerning that, you know, it's the actual misinformation that gets the most traction. Where was I? Yeah. These findings, these consistent findings across different social media platforms, suggest that viewers are most drawn to videos made by individuals with lived experience, and less so towards institutional or healthcare provider created videos. Which totally, you know, doesn't surprise me, and is not necessarily like a bad thing per se, where, you know, yeah, personal experience, narrative stories, like that is what we gravitate towards, even myself included. But then when it comes to, you know, actually assimilating and, you know, getting hopefully accurate information, they don't appear to be going to the healthcare provider created video, or like, you know, basically the accurate information, you know, generated by the people that are the experts. Basically, they're not really going to these people, unfortunately. Increasingly, social media influencers and independent video creators have been found to have an outsized influence on the dissemination of health information online. Indeed, in our study, none of the top 100 videos were uploaded by corporations, health organizations, for-profit entities, or non-profit entities, and only 11% of videos were uploaded by healthcare providers. This limited presence of healthcare providers on TikTok has been observed in other studies as well. Overall, healthcare providers did score significantly higher on the JAMA benchmark criteria and made significantly more useful videos and less misleading videos. This is the Journal of the American Medical Association benchmark criteria. Although this suggests that healthcare providers do upload higher quality content on the platform. 27% of healthcare provider videos, 3 out of 11, were still rated as misleading. We additionally found that all videos about ADHD were highly understandable, scoring over 90% on the, basically, their understandability score. The understandability score does not reflect accuracy, merely that the information is presented in an understandable manner. Thus, individuals may be seeing videos about ADHD on the platform that are highly understandable and yet misleading. Right. And that's where there might be like a disconnect. Where, yeah, for sure, a video or a piece of content can be understandable and like fully digestible, and virtually everyone can comprehend it, but like it can just be straight up misinformation, or as they say, misleading. And that's where like the balance, ideally you have both. You have both something that is comprehensible and understandable and is not misleading, is actually accurate, and is not misinformation, reflects the truth, or like whatever, as close as possible to the truth. And that's where it's super tricky, where I think you might have an environment of those with the most accurate and reliable information may not be in the best position to communicate it in an understandable way. And yet you have like the other side of like, you might have the least qualified people to speak about these things like ADHD that are not professionals or have no experience with it, or are just going by, they're essentially like a layperson, but they might just have a greater ability to communicate things in an understandable way, and that may very well be what gains traction. This was seen in our qualitative review of misleading videos, which often had an oversimplified or reductionist explanation of ADHD. The findings from our study provide several important insights into the dissemination of medical information about ADHD on TikTok. Approximately half of all videos analyzed were misleading. And the misinformation they contain has the potential to contribute to health anxiety or lead to increased healthcare utilization. The proprietary TikTok algorithm has been found to have a propensity to show users similar videos over time, which may further propagate misleading videos. Additionally, viral trends on TikTok, echo chambers in social media, and romanticization of mental health symptoms may perpetuate the dissemination of misleading information on TikTok. Increased healthcare use may occur for individuals who seek clinical attention after viewing TikTok videos about ADHD, a phenomenon that has been widely documented by major news organizations. Since self-report of ADHD symptoms may be over-endorsed, there may be an increased risk for overdiagnosis or misdiagnosis in these individuals as well. In general, there has also been renewed interest over rising rates of ADHD diagnoses and debate about the overdiagnosis of ADHD. Right, and that's where it appears to be super tricky. Where like, as they're sort of alluding to, this increased information or like this increased exposure to information about ADHD may be, driving people to seek out a professional opinion on whether they actually have it, or, going through a screening and potentially diagnosis process. And then maybe that's where, are more people just going to their doctors to be screened for ADHD and thus being diagnosed and it's an accurate diagnosis, or are we actually like overdiagnosing it? Whoops. Second. Okay, where was I? Yeah, where social media or TikTok like maybe driving people to just like go see their doctors more, or healthcare professional more, and it's like, are we just now getting accurate diagnoses, or are we just misdiagnosing people at a greater rate? Obviously, not my question to answer. That's up to the actual experts. TikTok has become particularly popular over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic context raises the question of whether individuals may be misattributing difficulties from pandemic public health measures. For example, having difficulty with maintaining attention when viewing a screen in isolation for prolonged periods, to ADHD symptoms. One related example is the rapid increase in tic-like behaviors that have been observed over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Tic disorder specialists have seen a dramatic increase in referrals for tic-like behaviors in primarily adolescent females that are inconsistent with usual presentations of primary tic disorders. These presentations are thought to be most consistent with a diagnosis of functional neurological disorder related to stressors over the course of the pandemic. The sociogenic propagation of tic-like behaviors across TikTok is a reflection of the impact of social media platforms on health behaviors, right? As brought up earlier, maybe the social contagion effect. Limitations of our study include TikTok's proprietary search algorithm results, which exclude video ads and do not allow for systematic searching of all videos or deleted videos. Not all videos contained detailed information to identify whether an uploader was a health professional or not. Additionally, the current study only screened for the top 100 most popular videos. Less popular videos may have different content quality and characteristics not captured in this study. Also, the conceptualization of what is considered as a misleading, useful, or personal experience video was done from the perspective of raters who are healthcare professionals. This perspective may not necessarily be in line with healthcare consumers or patients. For instance, while some videos may not be useful from the perspective of an healthcare provider, others may find it useful for other reasons. Additionally, although our inter-rater agreement was high, videos classified as useful could potentially be classified as personal experience videos, right? Again, there's at least some subjectivity in what they're doing, where maybe I should go a little bit into their methodology. They have what looks like sort of a panel or committee of, actual professionals, like rating these videos and classifying them. And so I imagine there has to be like some sort of, census or like near majority, whatever, vote or agreement. Videos on the platform may also be recorded to be humorous or spontaneous, and not necessarily recorded with the intent to disseminate medical information. However, even videos made without intent to disseminate medical information may describe non-specific symptoms, overgeneralizations, and characterizations about ADHD that could be misleading to viewers. Finally, there have also been criticisms of the use of tools such as the JAMA benchmark criteria as a method to evaluate online videos. Right. And that's like the tricky part. Because at the end of the day, as mentioned, like there has to be some sort of evaluation. And pretty much like no matter what, or almost like no matter who or like what group of individuals are doing the evaluation, there will always be someone or some group that will, question the experts or like, point the finger at whoever's doing the evaluating, that whatever, they're not qualified to do the evaluating, or like their evaluation is wrong. It really comes down to like, that philosophical question of like, what is expertise? However, there are currently no other widely used or accepted methods of assessing medical information videos online. In summary, this study is the first to show that misleading videos about ADHD are being widely disseminated on TikTok. Although the platform is the most popular social media application of 2020 and 2021, it is currently the least studied of the major social media platforms. It is thus important for clinicians to be aware of the dissemination of misleading videos on TikTok and the potential impact on clinical care. Future areas of research include a better understanding of the prevalence and nature of misinformation on TikTok for other mental health topics such as depression, anxiety, suicide, and self-harm. Our finding that healthcare providers generally upload higher quality and more useful videos deserves replication and further study to see whether healthcare provider engagement on the platform could help correct misinformation regarding ADHD and other mental health disorders. So I want to see in a little while how they pretty much, like, what panel of experts are they using to, you know, classify or score the videos. They don't go into detail. Results. Yes. Okay, methods. Yes. Okay, so it's right here. One psychiatrist, and one psychiatry resident. Here are the initials. Yeah, should be this one. And this one. With clinical experience in the diagnosis and management of ADHD, independently assess the videos using a categorical classification, often used to assess the content quality of social media videos. Videos were viewed, analyzed, and classified as useful, personal experience, or misleading. So again, this is human assessed. Videos were classified as useful if the video contained scientifically correct information about any aspect of ADHD, such as prevention, symptoms, diagnosis, treatments, or other information. Videos were classified as personal experience if it described a user's own personal or anecdotal experience of ADHD symptoms or treatment. Videos were classified as misleading if it contained information lacking scientific evidence, for example, unsubstantiated claims about treating ADHD. If a personal experience video additionally contained any generalized misleading statements, it was classified as misleading rather than personal experience. And where applicable, raters reference the Canadian ADHD Resource Alliance, Canadian ADHD Practice Guidelines, 4th edition. So, yeah, so not only, you know, with, at least in my opinion, we're qualified experts, you know, going in and looking at these videos, but as they say, you know, where applicable, they're like referencing, you know, what, you know, essentially like textbooks or like the reference literature. And all videos were also assessed using the Patient Education Materials Assessment tool for audiovisual materials, a validated instrument to assess the understandability and actionability of audiovisual patient education videos. Finally, videos were also rated on the Journal of American Medical Association benchmark criteria, a 4-point scale which assesses medical information quality based on authorship. All authors and contributors, their affiliations, and relevant credentials should be provided. Attribution, disclosure. So it's like, well, yeah, this is basically seems like kind of like a standard tool, or a tool that has been used in the past to, as they say, assess audiovisual materials, or specifically medical audiovisual materials. So I think pretty cool. For their funding, yeah, no conflict of interest. So, you know, there's no one working for TikTok involved in this research. Although, you know, even if there was, you know, whatever. This, I would say, this paints TikTok not in a great light. So regardless, even if one of these, you know, had some sort of stake in TikTok, that wouldn't necessarily invalidate the findings or the conclusion. You know, maybe if like the results of this study, it showed like that everything on TikTok, you know, was 100% accurate or like close to 100%, and that, you know, there's nothing misleading and it's all good quality content, then maybe there's cause for concern. But like, yeah, funding doesn't say everything, but it's always good to keep in mind. And then also on the topic further of social media, So there have been a group of studies that have been published recently, which is like this one, this one, and then this one. These were all pretty much like published almost like back to back to back of like, I think within the span of like a week, which I'm not going to cover all of them now, but I think this one is like a good starting point of like, you know, does as it says in the title, you know, does social media affect attitudes and behavior in an election campaign? Since I think many people are under the impression, and maybe myself included, that, you know, elections can be influenced by social media, or maybe like heavily influenced by social media, or maybe like driven primarily by social media. And this research, well, there's a bunch of researchers involved in this study from, you know, various institutions and affiliations. I highlighted some of them here, but, you know, you have some prestigious institutions involved in this study, although prestige, you know, doesn't, in my mind, doesn't mean all that much, but I know for some people, it matters. But you have quite a few researchers from Stanford, from various departments at Stanford. You have Princeton, you have UC Davis, University of Texas, University of Amsterdam. So just, and also, you know, an international effort where it's not just the United States. You have researchers from outside the United States. At least one, but I think you have multiple, if I remember correctly. So, what are the effects of machine learning algorithms used by social media companies on elections and politics? The notion that such algorithms create political filter bubbles, foster polarization, exacerbate existing social inequalities, and enable the spread of disinformation has become rooted in the public consciousness. Because the algorithms used by social media companies are largely opaque to users, there are numerous conceptions or folk theories of how they work and disagreements about their effects. Understanding how these systems influence key individual level political outcomes is thus of paramount scientific and practical importance. In particular, feed ranking system, algorithms designed to optimize the order in which content is presented to a user, which my understanding, or I just kind of assume just about every you know, social media platform uses this type of algorithm, this feed ranking system, to optimize the order in which content is presented to a user, have received considerable scrutiny from regulators and the public. But studying the effects of these feed algorithms is challenging. Even with a direct access to proprietary code and data, it would be difficult to characterize their impact, because such algorithms are personalized on the basis of many factors, such as a user's past behavior and predictions derived from the actions of similar users, which leads to complex and potentially heterogeneous effects on content ranking. Furthermore, a well-established counterfactual is not always obvious. Technology companies frequently conduct A/B tests or randomized controlled experiments to refine the user experience. These are typically designed to evaluate discrete elements such as the weight of individual inputs or how information is displayed in a specific panel. Evaluating the total impact of a machine learning feed ranking system necessitates a well-understood alternative for comparison. And so with these challenges in mind, we examined the effect of specific feed algorithms on individuals' political attitudes and behaviors. We did so by conducting randomized controlled experiments within the context of the 2020 US presidential election campaign on Facebook and Instagram, two major social media platforms with more than 3.5 billion combined monthly active users worldwide. And this was published In the past couple weeks this year, and it's obviously retrospective. It's looking back, and this is pretty much 3 years after the fact. This is during the 2020 U.S. presidential election. I don't actually know if they spent, essentially the entire 3 years, doing research and putting this study together and all of its findings. But I think it's fair to say, whatever, given the amount of, institutions and researchers involved in the study, I'm decently confident, or pretty highly confident, that they invested a considerable amount of time, doing research for this study. And then obviously, putting it together, interpreting it, analyzing it, and then coming to conclusions. Where, I think there are good reasons as to why, that this looks like it's delayed research, or it's very much after the fact. But I think they were investing a considerable amount of time and effort to ensure that they're doing, hopefully good quality research. So we took the algorithmic ranking systems on Facebook and Instagram as they existed in the fall of 2020 as the status quo, henceforth algorithmic feed. In a randomly assigned treatment group, users' feeds were ranked in reverse chronological order, henceforth chronological feed. Although arranging items in chronological order technically constitutes an algorithm, it is not predictive in the way that prominently scrutinized machine learning systems, such as those used by social media platforms, are. The simple chronological ranking, in which the most recent item is presented at the top of one's feed, is both easy to implement. It was originally used on both Facebook and Instagram, and continues to be an option on multiple social media platforms, and matches an alternative currently being proposed in public debates by policymakers and members of civil society. Right. Well, I definitely remember, early Facebook, early Facebook, where I think that's pretty much why they call it the timeline of things were ordered chronologically. As you scroll, you're just seeing older and older content, and then it's only somewhat after that your timeline was curated, or they pretty much I would say arguably abolished the timeline, where it's no longer in chronological order. You're getting a curated feed, curated feed from friends, people that you have as friends, and that's in your curated social circle, but it does not appear to be in chronological order. Theory and research questions. Algorithmic effects have rarely been the main focus of quantitative, publicly available research on social media and politics, as opposed to other domains. Out of necessity, studies have tended to treat social media as a unified bundle of features, which includes not only algorithms but also repeated interactions with certain individuals and the ability to reshare content, for example, or to manipulate exposure to specific sources within the platform. By replacing the status quo algorithmic ranking systems, our experiment allowed us the opportunity to focus on the role of Facebook's and Instagram's algorithms in sorting and ranking content from the inventory generated by connections, users' social networks, and the posts and interactions that they produce. This focus permitted us to identify the particular role of algorithmic ranking. Other elements or affordances of the bundle of social media features could conceivably be more important. Similarly, although the particular mix and ordering of content that a user sees may be an important factor in shaping political attitudes and behaviors, other determinants of this ranking besides the particular algorithm used, such as user choice or the composition of one's network, could be relevant as well. To the extent that prior research has documented social media effects on our outcomes of interest, a contribution of this study is to determine whether these can be attributed to a key feature of modern social media platforms: personalized algorithmic ranking system. Because the impact of these systems is largely unknown, we began with a research question. How does the chronological feed affect the content people see? We formulated this question and subsequent hypotheses in terms of our randomly assigned treatment, which participants' feeds were ranked in reverse chronological order, instead of by the default algorithm. Aside from its policy relevance and simplicity, our choice of the reverse chronological baseline was intended to maximize the differences in users' feed experiences, and thus the likelihood that algorithmically driven changes in content and emphasis could shape politically relevant attitudes and behaviors. Not sure what's going on, why things are delayed. I think it's like this graphic here. That's me. That cursor delayed. Interesting. My graphics card can't handle these graphs. So, additionally, machine learning feed algorithms are often thought of as a black box because the rules they follow are not transparent. They are also optimized for certain outcomes, such as user engagement, and they learn from user behavior and adapt over time. By contrast, a chronological feed does not exhibit any of these features because the same rule is applied to all users at all times. We focused on 3 primary hypotheses that represent important public concerns that have been theorized in existing research, tied to 3 groups of outcomes potentially affected by the altered mix of feed content. The first outcome that we studied is polarization. Scholars have long been interested in the polarizing effects of social media. Social media feed algorithms could affect political polarization in at least 2 ways. First, if algorithms use past user behavior to inform output, then perspectives with which a user has engaged in the past may be prioritized in the future, potentially encouraging selective exposure to like-minded political views. Repeated exposure to like-minded and reinforcing content may foster greater extremity on issue positions. Thus, we expected the chronological feed to lessen issue polarization. Yeah, and that sort of, at least to me, intuitively makes sense. 1 second. Where, yeah, since it's, basically chronologically, a chronological timeline is essentially not curated. At least it's not curated to, like, your likes, or like what it, what it's designed to think that you like and then give you that. And so presumably, if you're not getting that curated content that is, customized to you, then and it's just like chronological, then presumably, or at least intuitively, one would think that it would, decrease polarization. But that is sort of an assumption. So remains to be seen whether that's true. Second, algorithms may deprioritize content from certain parts of a user's network of connections. More specifically, prior work has argued that Facebook's features may encourage partisan stereotyping, and influence negative attitudes about outgroups. As a result, in the US partisan political context, we also expected the chronological feed to lessen affective polarization at the individual level. The second primary hypothesis relates to political knowledge. Feed algorithms could have consequences for political knowledge because news, in today's polarized society, is often engaging, making news more likely to be encountered both purposefully and incidentally. Although people use social media for purposes unrelated to politics, 1/3 of Facebook users consume news on the platform. We expected that moving users out of an algorithmic feed would reduce their time spent on the platform and their on-platform engagement, decreasing exposure to political information. Thus, we expected the chronological feed treatment to decrease knowledge about the 2020 election campaign and decrease recall of recent events covered in the news. Our third primary hypothesis relates to political participation, which could be influenced by feed algorithms in several ways. First, online political engagement may decline simply because overall online engagement declines in the chronological feed. Second, political knowledge may empower citizens to participate in the political process. And as knowledge declines, so too might participation. And third, social media algorithms may lower the coordination and information costs of mobilization, so that removing such algorithms would diminish participation. Another possible mechanism is that chronological ranking might increase exposure to more cross-cutting perspectives relative to the algorithmic feed, which scholars have argued can generate ambivalence, have a demobilizing effect. We hypothesized that the chronological feed would reduce both online and offline forms of political participation, including self-reported turnout in the 2020 election and on-platform political engagement. Beyond these three sets of predictions, we pre-specified a series of secondary hypotheses pertaining to public concerns, but for which we do not have clear theoretical expectations based on prior research. The secondary hypotheses cover the effects of the chronological feed treatment on factual belief accuracy, online consumption of political news using behavioral data, trust in traditional and social media, confidence in institutions, perceptions of polarization, engagement with partisan news sources, epistemic political efficacy, vote choice, belief in the integrity of the election, and support for political violence. So, what is the overall? I'm not going to dissect and go through in-depthly their design and their methodology, because I'm not, not qualified to dissect the methodology. Or not in the best position to dissect the methodology. I do have some trust that all these researchers here involved in this study know way better than I do how to design and implement a study about this social media and how to analyze it and put it together in figures like this. So let's see if I can get to the summary of the results, although maybe going through a little bit of their figures. Maybe starting with oh, okay. So here they're analyzing sort of how the algorithm or like the change in the algorithm kind of like affects their use in this case of Facebook. And you have the algorithmic feed, and then you have the chronological feed, and then average daily percent time spent versus US monthly active users. Okay, yeah, so it's Facebook and Instagram. And it looks like, at least to my eye, intuitively, once they change it to a chronological feed, like it appears to go down. Time spent versus monthly active users. Oh, okay. Never mind. Not that metric. Algorithmic feed, chronological feed. Action as proportion of exposures. Facebook, and Instagram. Yeah, algorithmic feed. Or likes, as opposed to chronological feed. Yeah, the likes go down and the comments go down. And it seems like the overall trend for Instagram like holds true. Which no surprise. I think that's pretty much like the whole point as to why, Facebook and Instagram implemented these algorithms. Like, you get more engagement, more likes, more comments, and thus more eyes on the platforms. Source of exposures. You have the algorithmic feed. So it seems like, the algorithmic feed, it's curated more to your friends. And then with Instagram, there actually doesn't seem to be much difference in the algorithmic feed and the chronological feed. Interesting. Average daily proportion of users, network with content viewed by user. Algorithm. Oh, Kitty, welcome. Thanks so much for passing by. Hope you're doing well. Nice to see you. And also thanks for listening. And also thank you for thanking me. And I also appreciate the feedback that you gave on my schedule, or my graphics for my schedule. Totally some gross oversights on my part when it came up with that graphic. Or it's like, yeah, obvious time zones, on like, yeah, obvious inefficiency in terms of like, I could have totally just like pooled all of the times if they're identical all together. Yeah, I was maybe too caught up in making the graphics as opposed to, you know, focusing on what it is that I want to say and the information that I want to convey. Oh, thank you so much. Super appreciated. So there's this one graphic there. That's sort of what I was going for, although, again, like, I was experimenting, and like, the graphic was sort of like, well, let's say the aesthetic. That's not an original aesthetic made by me. That was just like an aesthetic that was like already there in the program that I'm using. And so I just like went with that. Since, like, yeah, I think it looks cool. Whether I actually stick with that, I guess remains to be seen. But that's just like the one that caught my eye when I was like browsing. Like, okay, what type of aesthetic do they have on offer? And I was like, oh, that one looks cool. But maybe I have poor taste. It's also possible. Estimated changes in prevalence of feed content on both Facebook and Instagram. I'm not going to dissect this. Maybe a little bit too nitty-gritty, my taste. Population average treatment effects of the chronological feed relative to the algorithmic feed. Control group on both Facebook and Instagram. Let's see. Okay, left is Facebook, right is Instagram. Estimates are presented. Yeah. Effective polarization. Issue polarization. Okay, yeah. It would take me a while to dissect all of this and interpret it. So it's best just to get it straight from the authors themselves, what they say. So we demonstrated that Facebook's and Instagram's feed ranking algorithms in late 2020 strongly influenced users' experience on social media. The chronological feed dramatically reduced the amount of time users spent on the platform. And that chronological feed, you know, that's the one that's just straight, as implied by the term, by time, as in you're just getting things ordered by time, you know. The newest stuff, it's your eyes first, and then the old stuff, it's it later, if in fact you ever get to it. Reduced how much users engaged with content when they were on the platform, which again makes sense. There's a reason why, you know, Facebook and Instagram, they moved away from the chronological feed, and they went with this, you know, algorithm with that is essentially some curated content. And altered the mix of content that they were served. For example, decreasing content from friends while increasing content from pages and groups on Facebook. Users saw more content from ideological moderate friends and sources with mixed audiences, more political content, more content from untrustworthy sources, and less content classified as uncivil or containing slur words, than they would have on the algorithmic feed. Users also participated less in online forms of political engagement. Beyond these platform-specific experiences, however, replacing existing machine learning algorithms with reverse chronological ordering of content did not cause detectable changes in downstream political attitudes, knowledge, or offline behavior, including survey-based measures of polarization and political participation. These findings shed light on prior research as well as folk theories about the effects of social media algorithms on politics and elections. I actually think this is pretty important. Highlight. Chronological is top convenient for the user, and these people need the money. Too convenient for the user. Yeah. You're not wrong. Like, I much prefer, at least for me, I much prefer chronological content. I was totally, when Facebook, and I definitely think Instagram totally made that change. Where, yeah, things are no longer chronological. You're now, an algorithm is trying to determine what it is that you want. And just, spitting that out at you. But as you say, that's money driven, or almost certainly driven by money. And that is reflected, or rather, the effectiveness of the algorithm, I think, is reflected in the data. Because as they explicitly say, when they changed it to the chronological feed, it reduced the amount of time users spent on the platform, reduced engagement, and so, that's pretty much what you don't want as a social media platform. You want as many eyes as possible on the platform for as long as possible. You not only want to, get them there, you want to keep them there for as long as possible. But, yeah, on this point here, changing the algorithm had an effect that they're outlining here. At least it had an effect on how users engage with the platform and the type of content that they consume. But it didn't seem, at least based off of their analysis, and as they're explicitly saying, there was no detectable changes in downstream political attitudes, knowledge, or offline behavior, including survey-based measures of polarization and political participation. As in, yeah, the users are engaging with it differently, but that pretty much seems to be where the difference starts and stops. Where it's yeah, they're engaging more, but it does not appear to be resulting in greater polarization, or you're not shifting people's political opinions or positions, or at least it doesn't look like it based off of how they're measuring it. And so maybe this effect of social media on people's behavior, or this narrative about social media affecting people's behavior, or affecting how they engage with politics, may be overblown or overestimated. So there are several possible explanations for the disconnect between the large changes in online behavior caused by our treatment and the few discernible changes in political attitudes, knowledge, and offline behaviors in our user sample. It is possible that such downstream effects require a more sustained intervention period. So they're highlighting the timeline of the study of hey, maybe we just didn't do it for long enough to see an effect. Although our approximately 3-month study had a much longer duration than that of most experimental research in political communication, our results may also have been different if this study were not run during a polarized election campaign when political conversations were occurring at relatively higher frequencies, or if a different content ranking system were used as an alternative to the status quo feed ranking algorithms. Along these lines, this study was run in a specific political context, the United States, and the results may not generalize to other political systems. That being said, many of the features of the contemporary United States, such as increased polarization, the rise of populism, and the presence of online misinformation, are present in many other democracies. It is possible that the effects of algorithms could be more pronounced in settings with fewer institutionalized protections. For example, a less independent media or a weaker regulatory environment. Last, the change to the chronological feed affected many aspects of users' experience on Facebook, Instagram, and beyond. For example, decreasing time spent on the platforms, seeing more content from groups and pages rather than friends, seeing more and less of different types of content, and increasing time spent on other social media platforms. These factors may in turn have affected each other and have had differing effects on political attitudes, knowledge, and behaviors, so that in aggregate, we do not observe discernible changes. An additional set of limitations concerns the nature of our design. Our research design provides estimates of direct effects on individuals and, as such, cannot speak to whether social media shapes societal incentives or influences the behavior of other users. And again, they're pointing out limitations, which is great, just as like most other studies do, but not every study actually points out limitations. And if anything, well, yeah, I think you mostly see highlighting of limitations in the social sciences, and less so, my experience, in the life sciences. But like, yeah, as I sort of say over and over, there is no perfect study, and that there's always going to be, as reflected here, a limitation to any study. And especially when it comes to trying to assess human behavior, again, unless we're going to like lock them in a lab, and like start controlling every single variable, there will always be some amount of uncertainty associated with the results that we generate from, trying to like look at what's going on in the real world, and draw conclusions from there. So yeah, for example, if ranking algorithms affect the demand for certain kinds of content, they could influence the decisions of content producers, such as news organizations, civic organizations, and political campaigns, which would feed back into the inputs of the algorithmic system itself. Even more simply, the chronological feed experiences that we studied were composed in part of posts shared by other users, not in our sample, whose behavior was shaped by the standard algorithmic rankings. Our design thus cannot speak to general equilibrium effects. If our randomized intervention, chronological feed, were to be scaled up to the population of all users, its impact may differ because algorithmic feedback within networks may generate complex system dynamics. Future research can examine whether some of the strongest effects uncovered in this study, such as the decreased time spent on platform, mediate the relationship between the chronological feed and political attitudes and behaviors. But despite these limitations, the size of the experimental data we gathered is large. For the primary outcomes, our findings rule out even modest effects, tempering expectations that social media ranking algorithms directly cause affective or issue polarization in individuals or otherwise affect knowledge about political campaigns, or offline political participation. So like, yeah, they're highlighting what I would say are strengths, which again, pretty standard, are pretty common in the social science research, where yeah, even though it's inherently imperfect because we're trying to assess human behavior out in the real world, as they're sort of highlighting, they did use like they had a very large experimental data set, and I think the quality of the research, even though don't think impact factor or like the prestige of a journal means all that much, at least doesn't mean all that much to me personally. But the fact that this is published in Science, highlighted here, Science, it's pretty much like one of the most prestigious and respected journals in essentially all of science, maybe like next to Nature, and so I think that highlights just at least there should be greater confidence a little bit in the quality of the research if it's published in Science. At least one would hope so, but also at the same time, I myself have covered basically where Science has dropped the ball, where they did publish Science, and this goes back to the story that I covered about the president of Stanford voluntarily resigning from their position because some of their past research going back decades, and some of that research published in Science, so this particular journal, was found to be, at the very least, of poor quality, if not outright fraudulent, and thus they voluntarily stepped down. And so, I wish, at the end of the day, I wish it wasn't the case that, it was the journal that determines the quality of the research. But unfortunately, that's more or less how the system works. I do hope that's the case. Well, yes. So I agree with you. Like, I hope that's the case. But I think there's multiple instances where that's clearly not the case. And I think I've highlighted some of those. But yeah, rather prestige translates from regret. 1,000%. I agree with that. Or rather, that's where I wish we moved towards. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to operate like that. So, for the primary outcomes, our findings rule out even modest effects, tempering expectations that social media feed ranking algorithms directly cause affective or issue polarization in individuals or otherwise affect knowledge about political campaigns. Yeah, I already read that. So, although the dependent variables we studied are important for democratic health, they are not exhaustive. Future research should explore whether the kinds of ranking algorithms that we studied can produce substantial effects on other outcomes, such as agenda setting or users' own curation habits. To the extent that these findings suggest that social media algorithms may not be the root cause of phenomena such as increasing political polarization, it raises the stakes for finding out what other online factors, such as the incentives created by the advertising model of social media, or offline factors, such as long-term demographic changes, partisan media, rising inequality, or geographic sorting, may be driving changes that affect democratic processes and outcomes. So, they're pretty much saying that maybe pointing the finger, at least based off of this research, but this is like one study, and maybe there are other studies showing opposite things or different things. But at least they're essentially concluding that based off of their analysis, social media does not appear to be driving or increasing political polarization. And that maybe we should start looking at other things as to why there appears to be this increase in polarization. And even then, I think it might maybe even calls into question of like, there's this sentiment of increased political polarization, but like, is that actually even true? Does that actually track in reality? Or is that just like a perception, a misperception that we have that might be driven by social media? I don't actually know. I'm sure that there are probably studies that have tried to look at, polarization, whatever that means, try to assess it in the real world, and see if it's actually true. If, the trend over time is increased polarization. Where, I think this is a pretty decent example of where maybe our intuitions might be wrong, or at least so far as not borne out the evidence of, like, I think most people are probably under the impression that social media is driving or is resulting in increased polarization. And yet, based off of this analysis, and this analysis, seems to be pretty rigorous, and they're concluding that, well, actually, social media doesn't seem to affect behavior, doesn't seem to affect offline behavior all that much, if at all. And that maybe there are other factors we need to start looking at. Maybe we're wasting too much time looking at social media and dissecting it. And that maybe there are other things like, long-term demographic changes, rising inequality, geographic sorting, partisan media, that might be worthwhile to look at. That those other things are what might actually be driving this presumed increase in political polarization. So that's one story down out of the set that I'm going to cover over time. Covered this. Covered this in a past stream. And also this one in a past stream. I'm not gonna cover this one now. Sort of as like a hint of like, yeah, these are the series of studies. And in that vein, I haven't gone through this one yet. But they appear to be coming to the same conclusion, or like similar conclusion, where it's in the title. Like-minded sources on Facebook are prevalent, but not polarizing. And they even start off of like, yeah, increasing political polarization, or like, you know, there's concerns about, you know, echo chambers on social media, and increasing political polarization, or like this echo chamber effect is resulting in political polarization. And it's understandable why this sentiment exists, or at least, you know, it comes from something. This notion that, you know, people are you know, siloed into echo chambers on social media, and I've even covered research sort of about that. This is past research again about social media that I've covered, where social media behaviors associated with vaccine hesitancy, and, you know, they seem to highlight that, at least when it comes to the United States, there appears to be, when it comes to the United States in comparison to the UK, there appears to be some sort of echo chamber effect, at least when it comes to, you know, let's say vaccine information, or content about the vaccine. And they like kind of conclude, without going through it all over again. But yeah, altogether, we show that vaccine hesitancy is associated with following, sharing, and interacting with low-quality information online, as well as centrality within a conservative-leaning online community in the US. And yeah, these results illustrate potential challenges when it comes to vaccine uptake in a polarized social media environment. So like, these researchers themselves doing research about social media, they also appear to be under the same sentiment. Although, yeah, maybe, well, yeah, there's like that disconnect. Oh, and Bob Marley number 2, thank you so much for the follow, super appreciated. Yeah, to have your doppelganger, and I can't wait until further Bob Marleys join the community. But yeah, there might be a little bit of a disconnect, where this is just like me thinking out loud. But, you know, as we're seeing here in this research that, you know, I just briefly highlighted, but I've covered more in depth in a past stream. And actually, speaking of Bob Marley, I think it was Bob Marley number 1 that actually brought this research to my attention, or actually shared in the Discord, which, like, yeah, if anybody wants to share research in the Discord, or recommend things that I should cover, by all means, you're welcome to join the Discord. There's my opinion, there's some great resources there. But like, yeah, you know, if you're just looking at social media as sort of borne out in this research, you know, there appears to be some sort of echo chamber effect that occurs on social media, and thus, you know, a little bit of polarization on social media, and thus people might be extrapolating that to the outside world, of like, oh, since there appears to be this polarization on social media, well, then that must be reflective of what's going on, you know, in the offline world. But maybe that's where the disconnect lies. And this is just like, again, me thinking out loud, because as what they're sort of saying here of like social media feed algorithms, you know, how does it affect political campaigns? Where it's like they change the algorithm and it changes engagement, And when it's changed to that chronological feed algorithm, there's less engagement, less likes, less comments. They're spending less time on the platform, but it doesn't seem to affect their offline behavior. And so maybe it's a similar phenomenon where there might be this echo chamber effect, or this actual polarization in social media, but when it comes to the real world, that actually doesn't translate to the offline world. Just social media might be driving perceptions, but in reality, in day-to-day, they're basically just like separate worlds operating independently. I can totally see that as a potential hypothesis, or even playing out in reality. Because, I mean, there's multiple reasons why research like this is being carried out. Because, there was, or I think there still is, this sentiment that social media is driving political polarization, and that's affecting people's political behavior, and maybe like how they vote or how they engage with people they disagree with. And so it's like, question comes from something. And Zeron, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. Hope you're doing well. Always a pleasure. Where was I? Well, which that may not be like a bad thing. Or at least, it may not translate to the outside world, because that's pretty much what this study came to the conclusion, or that was the conclusion of this study. Of, like, as they say here in the abstract, despite these substantial changes in users' on-platform experience, the chronological feed did not significantly alter levels of issue polarization, affective polarization, political knowledge, or other key attitudes during the 3-month study period. But it's a 3-month study period, as they say, that there's a little bit of a limitation there, like maybe it just requires more time to see an effect. Maybe after years of social media use, and maybe after years of being in an echo chamber, maybe then does it actually affect your online behavior, or like how you engage offline. I'm sure some I might be in that category of a communist sitting on my couch posting memes. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's an almost impossible question to really answer conclusively. Yeah, exactly. Where, is it realistic that, we carry out this decades-long study on, social media and how people engage in social media and tracking, whatever, their opinions, their sentiments, their behavior, both online and offline. It's just like such a huge challenge carry out, super high quality research like this, where, like, I would say, in my non-expert opinion, this seems like really good quality research. But it could be so much better, but it's just super challenging to do sort of like that close to perfect study. Personally, I'm going against the grain by getting organized in real life. Just so I'm understanding you correctly. Are you saying that you are getting organized in real life, and that's how you're going against the grain? Or are you going against the grain because you are against getting organized in real life, and you prefer getting organized online? Just so that I understand what you're saying correctly. But yeah, I'm gonna cover these in future streams, maybe on my next stream. Or at least one of these. Cause like, yeah, this, like I said, this was a series of studies published about social media. And pretty much all of them, I think, have like a group of researchers, a whole host of researchers involved, where you have, 3 published in Science and this one in Nature. And so, in all likelihood, it's probably really good quality research. Not a guarantee, but probably. Cover this. I'm doing some socialist organizing in real life. Okay. Well, that's fantastic. I mean, at the end of the day, that is probably better, in my opinion, do organizing in real life than online, or at least using. I don't think it's a binary. Where you can do both, right? Where there's totally something to be said for organizing online, but then there's also something to be said for organizing offline, or hopefully the online helps you with the offline. And Refugule66, welcome. Thanks so much for passing by. Social media platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, TikTok are amongst the main interests of many intelligence groups from different countries, and they are more or less at this point core assets in protecting soft power. And some of the people tend not to address much. So I don't disagree with you, and here is where I kind of have to or not only have to, but I'm more than willing to plead ignorance. Because yeah, these are large platforms, especially like Facebook, TikTok, as highlighted here in this research. Both Facebook and Instagram combined, they represent, they have 3.5 billion users. So that's like approximately, whatever, 45% of the world. Although maybe some amount of that are bots. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it's like 4.5 billion, verified 3.5 billion verified humans. But at the end of the day, there's, let's say, 3.5 billion accounts. Probably the vast majority humans. And so I can totally see how, on paper, in theory, they have the potential to, as you say, not only just project soft power, but just exert, actual, for lack of a better term, hard power, or just explicit power and influence. But then, as we're sort of seeing here, and again, this research isn't perfect. It's still, it's not like the case is closed, but at least this research here doesn't seem to back up the argument or the sentiment that social media, or these social media platforms, are able to have influence in the real world. But again, this is one study, and I haven't covered this one yet, but I think it's sort of also highlighting that of yes, there's stuff happening on Facebook, but it doesn't seem to be polarizing. But I'll probably cover this one on next stream. So it's really hard to I guess just find out what's happening in reality. Thank you so much. The link, Zeron, super appreciated. So it just makes sense for China to bubble up from Western social media platforms, and it is logical for Western countries to put such heavy restrictions on TikTok. I don't disagree. I'm not just as, let's see, where is, just as I'm not against regulating AI, and even there are researchers, or this paper here, is pretty much almost explicitly recommending that, of limiting the potential of AIs to certain types of applications. And it might be necessary to restrict the use of these technologies. And this is just Chat GPT. This is GPT-3, a large language model. And so I'm also not against regulating these social media companies like TikTok. I think the Question is like how, which I'm not qualified to answer. Yeah, I think these are all really difficult questions to answer, personally. The U.S. government is more likely to use U.S. citizen data for malicious purposes, aka not just marketing, than the Chinese government. Then why is these? The answer is because the U.S. government wants a monopoly on its citizen data. Probably true. Like I totally understand the concern about China. But whether that's a greater concern than whatever U.S. citizens from the U.S. government, hard for me to say. So let's see what this link says. It is an uncomfortable job for anyone trying to draw the line between harmful content and protecting freedom of speech. It's a balance, Aaron says. In this official Facebook video, Aaron identifies himself as the manager of the team that writes the rules for Facebook, determining what is acceptable and what is not. Thus, he and his team effectively decide what content the platform's 2.9 billion active users see and what they don't see. What is the date? Okay, so it's about a year old. Which, you know, no surprise. Oopsie. I don't know how to spell billion. Okay, 3.5 billion as of this publication in July 2023. Although obviously there's a delay between data collection and this being published. Aaron is being interviewed in a bright warehouse turned studio. He is wearing a purple sweater and blue jeans. He comes across as a very likable, smiley person. It is not an easy job, of course, but someone has to make those calls. Transparency is incredibly important in the work that I do, he says. Aaron is CIA, or at least he was until July 2019, when he left his job as Senior Analytic Manager at the agency to become Senior Product Policy Manager for misinformation at Meta, a company that owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. In his 15-year career, Aaron Berman rose to become a highly influential part of the CIA. For years, he prepared and edited the President of the United States daily briefing, writing and overseeing intelligence analysis to enable the President and senior U.S. officials to make decisions on the most critical national security issues, especially on the impact of influence operations on social movements, security, and democracy. His LinkedIn profile reads, none of this is mentioned in the Facebook video. Okay. Interesting. Continue. I just catch up with chat. China's government is going to preemptively arrest U.S. citizens on U.S. soil based on harvested data. The FBI is, or the FBI already does. Don't forget, it's not all about data collection, it's also guiding public opinion. Well, probably the CIA had chats like ChatGPT guiding public opinion for the last 10 years. I'm a little bit skeptical, but I actually would it, let's say, surprise me? But if you have anything that, let's say, hints at that or points out that the CIA had access to that type of technology, yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical personally. Or I'm skeptical of two things because those are two separate things. Like even if I grant that the CIA had something like ChatGPT, I think it's a hard thing to prove that, you know, they're guiding public opinion. And even then, as we sort of just went through, you know, the ability to guide public opinion through, let's say, social media, seems to be, you know, maybe not so strong. Or again, it's just like one paper, but it may be overestimated. Oh, you ate pizza with wasabi? Well then you're a much more courageous person than I am. Like, well, I have to ask, but only share if you want to. But the pizza, like plain cheese pizza with wasabi, or like there are other ingredients as well. No judgment on my part on whatever your pizza preferences are. but that does, not gonna lie, that doesn't sound appetizing to me. Guiding public opinion isn't as hard as something. I don't disagree. I'm just more calling into question of, like, you know, can you guide public opinion with social media? Like, I think, like, again, it's really difficult to answer that question, but I think it's a valid question, on that, you know, we should only really come to a conclusion, when we have evidence showing that social media, you know, is actually influencing, or, like, swaying public opinion, or, like, social media, to use their terms, like, is affecting, significantly offline behavior of, like, changing attitudes, changing voting habits, etc., etc. Social media may not affect attitudes and behavior in elections, but radicalized people aren't exactly voting. I actually don't know the data. Perfectly honest. I think that this is me thinking out loud, but I just kind of speculate that, you know, the radicalized, you know, the far right are the most incentivized, or rather they're the most likely to vote, and then the far left, I don't think they're as enthusiastic as the far right to vote, but I could be totally wrong about that. But I know that, or rather, from what I remember of the data, generally speaking, like, those who tend to be right-leaning tend to have whatever, they tend to vote more. I have no proof to my theory, but my mind can't accept the idea that the CIA got introduced to ChatGPT level AI the way we did. Yeah, that's probably fair. Like, would it surprise me? Would it surprise me that the CIA had either something equivalent, or maybe they had some early access to ChatGPT? I think it's just, I would like to believe that, and maybe I might just be naive, totally fair, naive and ignorant, but I would like to believe that, you know, even if they had access to that tool, that they wouldn't be using it to, like, sway public opinion or, like, guide public opinion. But it is a valid concern. Yeah, the far left aren't voting. That is my understanding. I bet CIA also has iPhone in 90s. Maybe like a prototype. I don't know. I can't verify that claim. So Berman's case is far from unique, however. Studying Meta's reports, as well as employment websites and databases, Mint Press has found that Facebook has recruited dozens of individuals from the CIA, as well as many more from other agencies like the FBI and Department of Defense. These hires are primarily in highly politically sensitive sectors, such as trust, security, and content moderation, to the point where some might feel it becomes difficult to see where the US national security state ends and Facebook begins. In previous investigations, this author has detailed how TikTok is flooded with NATO officials, how former FBI agents abound at Twitter, and how Reddit is led by a former war planner for the NATO think tank, the Atlantic Council, but the sheer scale of infiltration of Facebook blows these away. Facebook, in short, is utterly swarming with spooks. Which, even if I grant this as true, which I'm more than happy to, like, I would agree with you that optically it doesn't look good. But it's like a separate claim of, like, well, are they doing basically bad stuff? Or, you know, do they have nefarious intentions? But hey, maybe it has more to say on that. In a political sense, trust, safety, and misinformation are the most sensitive parts of Meta's operation. It is here where decisions about what content is allowed, what will be promoted, and who or what will be suppressed, are made. These decisions affect what news and information billions of people across the world see every day. Therefore, those in charge of the algorithms hold far more power and influence over the public sphere than even editors at the largest news outlets. I think potentially, yeah, I don't disagree. Obviously, you know, given the fact, as you just went through, both, you know, combined, Facebook and Instagram have roughly half the world. And so, like, yeah, the reach is just like far greater than just about anything that has come before, at least when it comes to, you know, traditional newsprint. So I agree. The potential is there. Whether it's actually happening, or like they're actually having this type of influence, I think it's a different story. There are a number of other ex-CIA agents working in these fields. Deborah Berman, for example, spent 10 years as a data and intelligence analyst at the CIA before recently being brought on as a trust and safety project manager for Meta. Little is known about what she did at the agency, but her pre-agency publications indicate she was a specialist on Syria. Between 2006 and 2010, Brian Weisbard was a CIA intelligence officer, his job entailing, in his own words, leading global teams to conduct counterterrorism and digital cyber investigations, and identifying online social media misinformation propaganda and covert influence campaigns. Directly after that, he became a diplomat, underlining how close the line is between those two professions, and is currently a director of trust and safety security and data privacy for Meta. Which, you know, that's where it's like tricky. I'm definitely in no position to really judge what's going on here, but at least intuitively, it doesn't seem totally unheard of or nefarious that a CIA intelligence officer would be a director of trust and safety security and data privacy for Meta. Although, to be fair, I don't actually know what, you know, person in this position actually does, but it doesn't seem too far-fetched. But like, yeah, like optically, I would agree it doesn't look great. Meanwhile, the LinkedIn profile of Cameron Harris, a CIA analyst until 2019, notes that he's now a Meta Trust and Safety Project Manager. Okay. Individuals from other state institutions abound as well. Emily Vasher was an FBI employee between 2001 and 2011, rising to the rank of supervisory special agent. There she was headhunted by Facebook Meta and is now director of trust and safety. Between 2010 and 2020, Mike Bradow worked for USAID, eventually becoming deputy director of policy for the organization. USAID is a US government-funded influence organization which has bankrolled or stage-managed multiple regime change operations abroad, including Venezuela in 2002, Cuba in 2021, and ongoing attempts in Nicaragua. Since 2020, Meta has employed Bradow as a misinformation policy manager. Like, yeah, again, optically, I would say this looks worse and sounds worse than this situation here with the CIA person, or the ex-CIA person, being in charge of whatever, data privacy and safety and security. Like, yeah. This raises, you know, a little bit of a yellow flag. My work public speaking was almost certainly more impactful in my view. If there were not examples of Meta clearly violating user privacy on behalf of the US government, then maybe there would be room for reasonable... yeah, that's fair. Like, I definitely don't want to prop up Meta as some sort of, like, bastion of, like, whatever, either, like, following the law, or, like, you know, acting with good intention, or acting with any sort of, whatever, ethical or moral framework. I know at the end of the day, like, they're a company. And, like, yeah, I am generally speaking inherently skeptical of companies. But, like, yeah, it's also really hard to prove. Whatever, you know. I think you just want to go on a case-by-case basis. Of, like, yeah, I could totally recognize, even of all the things that have been shown that Meta has done that have been bad, I don't want to condemn, like, everything. As in, like, well, then every single employee here that they're highlighting then has some sort of, like, you know, bad intentions. I do try to operate, like, under the principle of innocent until proven guilty. Even though, like, yeah, maybe Meta has some sort of history with being guilty of doing some things. But then, I don't know if that carries forward to every single thing that they do. Others have similar paths. Neil Potts, a former intelligence officer with the U.S. Marine Corps, is Vice President of Trust and Safety at Facebook. Like there's a lot of trust and safety, whatever, officers or directors. In 2020, Sharif Kamal left his job as a program manager at the Pentagon to take up the post of Meta Trust and Safety Program Manager. Joey Chan currently holds the same trust and safety post as Kamal. Until last year, Chan was a U.S. Army officer commanding a company of over 100 troops in the Asia-Pacific region. None of this is to say that any of those named are not conscientious, that they are bad people or bad at their job. Vasher, for example, helped design Facebook's Amber Alert program, notifying people to missing children in their area. So I'm glad that, they're highlighting this. But hiring so many ex-US state officials to run Facebook's most politically sensitive operations raises troubling questions about the company's impartiality and its proximity to government power. Like, yeah, I agree with this sentiment. It raises questions, as I sort of said, like, there's some, like, yellow flags, that I'll throw it on the field. For sure. Meta is so full of national security state agents that at some point it almost becomes more difficult to find individuals in trust and safety who were not formerly agents of the state. I mean, 80% of Twitter employees were not needed to keep the software online. What were those 80% really doing? What were all those jobs? I could be using too much imagination. But wouldn't be surprised that a big bunch of them were a cover of it. Well, so, like, I'm still, well, it's now X, right? I'm still on X, and I still use X. I'm obviously no longer tweeting, I'm posting, since, it's no longer Twitter. But at least from my perspective, my subjective perspective. But, like, yeah, I'm sure there's probably, like, some redundancy in the employees that were formerly at Twitter, but I don't have any data to back this up. But I do find that Twitter or X is overall less functional than it was previously, in terms of, like, how quickly it refreshes, and just like it feels more buggy overall. But again, I have no data to back this up. It can totally just be a placebo effect. But I think, yeah, getting rid of those 80% had, at least in my mind, some effect. Where I sort of get the sense that Twitter, or X is operating off like bare bones. At least it feels that way to me. It feels way less smooth, way more buggy. Where I'm sure they probably could have gotten rid of, like, whatever, 40-50% maybe, and still operated as I expected it would have after the takeover. But I have a hard time believing that, all 80% were, let's say, doing intelligence operations. Or at least, until there's some evidence showing that, which would it surprise me if a story came out saying that? Not necessarily. But again, I try to give the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, it totally is a good point. Some employees from modern content, which can be another way to say intelligent operations. So, that is my understanding of, like, a lot of the content. I know it's not only the content moderation team, but a significant portion of the staff was, like, content moderation. And I know a decent amount of that, or maybe all of that, was, like, gutted out. And yeah, I'm totally Xing all over the place. There are also apparently dozens upon dozens of unlawful termination lawsuits against Musk now. Are there? Well, that doesn't surprise me either. So yeah, despite its efforts to brand itself as a progressive, woke organization, the Central Intelligence Agency remains deeply controversial. It has been charged with overthrowing or attempting to overthrow numerous foreign governments, some of them democratically elected, helping prominent Nazis escape punishment after World War II, funneling large quantities of drugs and weapons around the world, penetrating domestic media outlets, routinely spreading false information, and operating a global network of black sites where prisoners are repeatedly tortured. Therefore, critics argue that putting operatives from this organization in control of our news feeds is deeply inappropriate. I don't necessarily disagree with the sentiment. Again, I think there's valid cause for concerns. Whether this all here is true, I have no idea. Not qualified. I'll grant it as true. One of these critics is Elizabeth Murray, who in 2010 retired from a 27-year career at the CIA and other U.S. intelligence organizations. This is insidious, Murray told Mint Press, adding, I see it as part of the gradual and sinister migration of ambitious young professionals originally trained to surveil and target the bad guys during the so-called global war on terror, of the post-9/11 era. No comment. Some may ask what the big fuss is. There is a limited pool of individuals with the necessary skills and experience in these new tech and cybersecurity fields, and many of them come from government or institutions. Casinos, after all, regularly hire card sharks to protect themselves, but there's little evidence that this is a poacher turned gamekeeper scenario. Facebook is certainly not hiring whistleblowers. The problem is not that these individuals are incompetent. The problem is that having so many former CIA employees running the world's most important information and news platform is only one small step removed from the agency itself, deciding what you see and what we do not see online, and all with essentially no public oversight. But even that, if memory serves me correctly, I think, at least based off of some of the headlines that come across my newsfeed, it's like, Facebook appears to be, maybe not struggling, but, its stock is like going down. And that, Facebook is not as popular as it once was. And maybe at one point people were getting their news from Facebook. Basically, I think its popularity decreasing over time. At least that's just the sense I get. I don't know if it's the most popular, but I think it's definitely up there. In this sense, this arrangement constitutes the best of both worlds for Washington. They can exert significant influence over global news and information flows, but maintain some veneer of plausible deniability. The US government does not need to directly tell Facebook what policies to enact. This is because the people in decision-making positions are inordinately those who rose through the ranks of the national security state beforehand, meaning their outlooks match those of Washington's. And if Facebook does not play ball, quiet threats about regulation or breaking up the company's enormous monopoly can also achieve the desired outcomes. I don't know, I could see both sides of this. Yeah, as much as I don't particularly like, super large companies, or arguably monopolistic companies. I think there's a potential downside of breaking it up, or intervening too heavily. Is Insta the most popular one now? And YouTube, I assume, but yeah, totally. That's a good question. Maybe it's Googleable. Assuming Pew Research reputable, which I generally regard it as, at least when it comes to raw data. Maybe not necessarily interpretation. But it looks like Facebook, well, when was this published? So it's a year old. I have no reason to believe that the trend is dramatically different than a year ago. Yeah, Facebook, most widely used site for news. But at the end of the day, Instagram is owned by Facebook or Meta. And then, as you say, refucules, YouTube second most. Again, this article is not claiming that any of the named individuals are nefarious actors, or even that they are anything about model employees. This is a structural problem. Yeah, so I can... Yep, I would overall agree that if they're highlighting that it is problematic that, there's a lot of former government or intelligence agents being hired at Meta, that, I think there's a valid cause for concern. Well, it seems like it depends on where... Speaks to, some of the problem. I think it depends on where you get your news from. According to, at least from what I gather, from statements made by, you know, Elon Musk. Seems like Twitter or X is like, you know, better than ever, or like bigger than ever. That his popularity has never been higher. But then if I go to, let's say, the BBC, or, you know, let's say a mainstream media news outlet, I get sort of like the opposite messaging. Of like, yeah, X is really struggling. And that, you know, yeah, it's really struggling to even get into profitability. I mean, I think it always has been essentially unprofitable, but it seems like the situation is only getting worse and worse. Put another way, if Facebook were hiring dozens of managers from Russian intelligence agencies like the FSB or GRU, everybody would recognize the inherent dangers. It should be a little different when it hires individuals from the CIA, an organization responsible for some of the worst crimes of the modern era. I don't disagree. Facebook has also hired a plethora of ex-national security state officers to run its intelligence and online security operations. Until 2013, Scott Stern was a targeting officer at the CIA, rising to become chief of targeting. Well, yeah. In this role, he helped select the targets for US drone strikes across South and West Asia. Today, however, as a senior manager of risk intelligence for Meta, misinformation and malicious actors are his targets. Hopefully, he is more accurate at Facebook than at the CIA, where the government's own internal assessments show that at least 90% of Afghans killed in drone strikes were innocent civilians. Yeah, not nice to read. And also, obviously, super tragic. Yeah, I definitely, and I never consider Elon any sort of like honest actor. Or I pretty much don't really take anything that he says seriously. even his statements that he's going to, you know, have whatever, a fight with Mark Zuckerberg. You know, no surprise he appears to be, you know, coming up with excuses to back out of that. I pretty much see him essentially as like a used car salesman. Obviously like a really good one. Seems to work for him. But I pretty much like put him in that category. Other former CIA men at Facebook include Mike Torrey, who left his job as a senior analyst at the agency to become Meta's technical lead of detection, investigations, and disruptions of complex information operations, threats, and former CIA contractor Hagen Barnett, who is now head of harmful content operations at the Silicon Valley giant. Meta's intelligence and online security team includes individuals from virtually every government agency imaginable. In 2015, Department of Defense Intelligence Officer Susanna Morrow left her post to become Director of Global Security Intelligence for Meta. The FBI is represented by Threat Investigations Manager Ellen Nixon and Head of Cyber Espionage and Investigations Mike Divolansky. Facebook's Influence Operations Policy Manager Olga Bolagalova had stints at the State Department and the Office of the Secretary of Defense. For Meta, David Agranovich and Nathaniel Glacier both worked for the National Security Council. Agranovich is Director of Global Threat Disruption at Facebook, while Glacier is Head of Security Policy. Haley Chang, Director and Associate General Counsel for Cybersecurity. It seems like they're just highlighting one by one. It's like, these are the profiles. One of Meta's most outwardly facing employees is its Global Threat Intelligence Lead for Influence Operations, Ben Nimmo, a character Mint Press has covered before. Between 2011 and 2014, he served as NATO's press officer, moving the next year to the Institute for Statecraft, a UK government-funded propaganda operation aimed at spreading misleading information about enemies of the British state. He was also a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, NATO's semi-official think tank. Perhaps then, it is not surprising that Facebook never seems to find US government influence operations online. They are part of one. But the way they treat Tesla, not recognized by Bill Gates or by the president when he had a gathering for electric cars, makes you feel that whatever is the other party of billionaires in the US have a bone to pick with Elon. So yeah, he has a motive to lie, but also there seems a motive mainstream media to lie against him. But didn't. So in a decent amount of time, I did my research on, let's say, the history of Tesla. But did they not at one point, if I remember correctly, get essentially some government funding to get off the ground? I know that they, if I remember correctly, again, they since like paid it back, as in whatever money that the government gave them. Like they've, I think, since paid that back, if not more. And so at least in my mind, hard to argue that there's some sort of like bias against Tesla. And like they appear to be doing at least decently well. I don't know if they're exactly flourishing. I haven't checked like their stock or anything like that. This article is obviously very biased, although I still think the concern is valid and there needs to be transparent, independent investigation into the U.S. state. Yeah, I definitely don't disagree at all with this sentiment. But like, yeah, there appears to be, a pretty clear, let's say, overall negative narrative. Would not recognize Bill Gates by him cutting their stocks. Oh, okay, if that's actually true. I have no idea about that. Zuckerberg's famous loss of a satellite with SpaceX. Tesla and SpaceX have both received major government subsidies. Yeah, that is my understanding. At least if memory serves me correctly, when last I did research about Tesla and SpaceX. Well, if I remember correctly, SpaceX like interfaces, like I think with whatever, I think it interfaces with NASA, or at least I think they have like a collaboration or some sort of partnership with NASA. So I mean, that is a government agency. And it wouldn't necessarily surprise me. Like I don't actually, obviously, I don't really fully know what the Pentagon does. But it doesn't seem all that out there that, SpaceX, which, deals with space, or like sending things to space, that the Pentagon would like interface with that, or have some sort of whatever relationship, either, spoken or unspoken relationship with the Pentagon. Although unless the writer has straight up fabricated those profiles, people don't lie about working for the US government. Yeah, like I'm not really calling into question, let's say, the accuracy of like the profiles that they're highlighting. While Meta has not unmasked any nefarious US government action, it regularly uncovers what it claims are foreign disinformation campaigns. According to a recent Facebook report, the top 5 locations of coordinated inauthentic behavior between 2017 and 2020 on its platform are Russia, Iran, Myanmar, the United States, and Ukraine. However, it was at pains to note that American operations were driven by fringe far-right elements, white supremacists, and conspiracy theorists, and not the government. This is despite the fact that it is now well established that the Pentagon fields a clandestine army of at least 60,000 people whose job is to influence public opinion, the majority of them doing so from their keyboards. A Newsweek expose from last year called it the largest undercover force the world has ever known. Doesn't necessarily surprise me either. The explosion of Pentagon cyber warfare, moreover, has led to thousands of spies who carry out their day-to-day work in various made-up personas. The very type of nefarious operations the United States decries when Russian and Chinese spies do the same. Newsweek warned that this army was likely breaking both US and international law by doing so, explaining that these are the cutting-edge cyber fighters and intelligent collectors who assume false personas online, employing non-attribution and misattribution techniques to hide the who and the where of their online presence, while they search for high-value targets and collect what is called publicly accessible information, or even engage in campaigns to influence and manipulate social media. As far back as 2011, The Guardian was reporting on this enormous cyber force, whose job it was to secretly manipulate social media sites by using fake online personas to influence our internet conversations and spread pro-American propaganda. Yet the ex-military and ex-CIA officials, Facebook officials, the ex-CIA officials' Facebook employees, not seem to have found any trace of their former colleagues at work on the platform. Yeah, I generally overall consider Newsweek pretty credible. Well, so it doesn't necessarily surprise me that they try. And here's where I'll bring it back to AI, where okay, like you're asking very valid, or I think what's being highlighted are very valid concerns. That pretty much this falls in line with what I've covered of like Facebook or social media and their ability to influence, sway public opinion, or as like what was mentioned earlier, exert soft power, or maybe exert explicit power. And then you have research like this, of like this is GPT-3, and like it has a greater ability to disinform us, or basically generate misinformation better than humans. And so it's like, well, this is almost a pretty worst case scenario, of like, do we want something like Facebook having access to now GPT-4, or somewhere down the line GPT-5 or whatever, like the best iteration of GPT, that can generate misinformation. And then like, if what I'm reading now about, pretty much, the infiltration, or like former government intelligence officials working for Meta and other social media platforms like X, well, then they pretty much have like presumably some of the best tools available to them to, pretty much generate misinformation, and then spread it and disseminate it worldwide. So I can totally see some potential for like great harm. But then it's a little bit, there is that question of like, well, even if they're able to do all that with like tools like this, does it actually affect things in the real world? And that's why I'll go back to this research of like, well, okay, yeah, on paper it looks like, in combination with social media's reach, access to billions of people, in combination with this powerful tool in large language models, they can potentially wield a lot of power. But then it may actually fall flat, of like, if we actually try and go and look of like, are they actually exerting influence and power, may not actually be the case. I don't know, but I do think there's a distinction to make there, of like, there are valid concerns, just as there that there's a reason, like I said, why this research is being carried out, of like, there are valid concerns of whether social media is driving political polarization, or is exerting the political landscape. But then again, they tried to look, but this study is not perfect. Based off of this analysis, it doesn't seem like it's having much of an effect. So again, that's more or less trying to highlight the difficulty of answering these questions. I highly doubt, based on my experience with ChatGPT, that the US government could use AI in such operations prior to 2020. Yeah, 20. I think that is, I have so many concerns with these large language models, where, like I said, this disinformation or misinformation aspect of like, we're almost certainly somewhere soon going to get to the place where, when I start covering, research and studies on stream, I'm probably gonna have to do my due diligence of like, is this an actual study, generated by humans, or is this just a straight AI fabricated generated study that just looks legitimate, sort of analogous to now we have AI art, AI music. Like, we might have AI science that is just looks as close to real as possible, but is actually fake. That seems like a really difficult place to navigate, that I don't look forward to navigating. Like, already I'm concerned personally of like covering research that somewhere down the line is shown to be fraudulent. And so I try. I'm sure it's gonna get to the point, if I do this long enough, that I'll probably have to like go back and say like, oh, this study that I covered whatever time ago, bad study, or is actually fraudulent. But I definitely, am concerned about getting to the place of like AI generated research or science. So since its beginning in 2004, Facebook has grown to become a massive global empire and by far the most important news distributor the planet has ever known. The company boasts almost 3 billion active users, meaning that nearly 2 in 5 people worldwide use the platform. A recent 12 country study suggests that around 30% of the entire world gets its news via their Facebook feeds. This gives whoever's in charge of curating those feeds and controlling those algorithms inestimable power. It also represents a serious national security threat for all other countries, especially those that might wish to take a path independent from the United States. That those people are in large part former spooks makes this threat all the more perilous. This is far from a hypothetical quandary. In November, less than a week before the country's election, Facebook took the decision to delete hundreds of pages and accounts belonging to individuals and groups that supported the Nicaraguan Sandinista Party, a longtime U.S. target for regime change. These included many of the nation's most influential journalists and media outlets. Considering that around half of the country uses the platform for news and entertainment, the decision could barely have been more intrusive and was likely designed to try to swing the election towards the pro-US candidate. Facebook claims that those accounts were bots engaged in inauthentic behavior. When those individuals migrated onto Twitter, recording videos identifying who they were to show they were not bots, Twitter immediately deleted those accounts too in what was dubbed a coordinated attempt at suppression. The individual behind this attempt was the aforementioned Ben Nemo, who co-authored an unconvincing report full of questionable assumptions and allegations. This included an insinuation that accounts following a pattern of activity whereby their Facebook usage levels peaked in the morning, afternoon, and dwindled to almost nothing after midnight Nicaragua time suggested they were bots. Facebook was also used by right-wing Cubans to attempt a US-backed color revolution against the ruling communist government last year. Giving any individual or group that much control over the airwaves of communication raises huge questions about national security and sovereignty, doubly so when those individuals are so intimately connected to the US national security state. When asked what the public's reaction would be to the news of such an intimate connection between Facebook, her former employer, Murray stated that she was unsure whether many would be bothered. I would like to think that the American public would strenuously object. However, the CIA and other agencies have worked over many decades to cultivate a positive, indeed almost glamorous image in the eyes of the vast majority of the public, mostly through TV series, Hollywood films, and favorable media coverage. So sadly, my guess is that the vast majority of the public probably believes that these are the folks who shouldn't be, these are the folks who should be in charge. However, she said the news would likely land a very different way in countries that have been the target of Washington's ire. As you're no doubt aware, the CIA has an atrocious public reputation in most parts of the world, he added. Mint Press has found former representatives of the U.S. national security state in virtually every politically sensitive department of Facebook. This includes even higher levels. Between 2020 and 2021, Chris Rose was a member of Meta's governance oversight board, the group responsible for the overall direction of the platform. He left his job as the director of national intelligence at the president's daily brief, writer to take up the role. Before that, he had spent 6 years at the CIA's political and counterterrorism analyst. Meanwhile, Gina Kim Sumalas, Facebook's director. Okay. I mean, this is highlighting a bunch of people already. So, why are these national security state officials so attracted to Meta? One reason Murray explained is financial. By snagging a CIA employee, a company can save a considerable sum, she said, explaining that the individual has likely undergone extensive professional training at taxpayer expense and probably has a security clearance, something that is difficult, expensive, and time-consuming to obtain in private sector. Therefore, companies dealing with matters of state secrecy, such as defense contractors, have historically courted both current and former officers to fill their ranks, enticing them with much higher salaries than they can receive in government service. What is new, or at least newly known to us, is that now these professionals are being sought after by social media companies like Facebook, Google, and others who are now heavily monitoring, surveilling, and censoring content and then sharing data about users with US government entities. Yeah, doesn't surprise me. Such is the need for these individuals in these fields that private companies often hire former national security agencies to do the screening for them. For instance, other like profile, former spooks for blah blah blah. Global security, yes. Okay, more government officials being hired. So, 45 years ago, legendary journalist Carl Bernstein released an investigation documenting how the CIA had managed to infiltrate US and global media. The CIA had placed hundreds of agents into newsrooms and had convinced hundreds more reporters to collaborate with them. These included individuals at some of the most influential outlets, including the New York Times. The CIA needed to do this clandestinely. Any attempt to do so openly would harm the effectiveness of the operation and provoke stiff public resistance. But by 2015, there was barely a murmur of disapproval when Reuters announced that it was hiring 33-year veteran CIA manager and director Don Skolicki as a global director, even when the company announced that her primary responsibility was to advance Thomson Reuters' ability to meet the disparate needs of the US government. Facebook, however, is vastly more influential than the New York Times or Reuters, reaching billions of people daily. In that sense, it stands to reason that it would be a prime target of any intelligence organization. It has become so big and ubiquitous that many consider it a de facto public commons and believe it should no longer be treated as a private company. I know that there's people making arguments that it should be treated as a public square. I'm not really convinced by those arguments, personally. At least not yet. Considering who is making many of the decisions on the platform, that distinction between public and private entities is even more blurry than many presume. Which I don't disagree that blurring the lines. But again, I've yet convinced that like, yeah, it should be treated as, you know, like whatever, town square, like a public platform. This whole thing makes me lose so much trust with these platforms, but I understand why people use them. They become a core part. Well, also, that's where it's super difficult and challenging. I mean, same thing with smartphones. Of like, you know, we have now fingerprint scanners, you know, face scanners, our phones and our many of our devices that people have in their homes. They have the potential to record our conversations. But at the very least, when it comes to like smartphones, like if you want to live in this world, or at least you know, function in any reasonable way in this world, like you gotta get a smartphone. Like there are totally sort of minimalist like smartphones, but at the end of the day, like it's almost like if you want to avoid using a smartphone, like you really have to go out of your way. You are essentially disincentivized if you are not using a smartphone. Or there's literally, you know, you have all the incentive in the world to use a smartphone. Just as you like, it sort of like reflects my relationship to like cars. Of like I have no desire to own a car. I generally don't drive, and have no desire to drive. And I totally pay, you know, a social cost to me not driving and me relying on public transportation, or me, you know, having other people, you know, drive for me. But, you know, I try to at least somewhat stick to my principles of like, yeah, I can't justify buying a car, at least for me, myself. And like, you know, all the environmental and other costs associated with cars. But, you know, other people, you know, there's every incentive to buy a car. Especially now there's almost every incentive to buy an electric car. But I don't think everyone having an electric car is the answer. And yeah, we can't go build a tent in the woods and forget all smartphones, connect with smokes. At least not yet. You know, even though like I'm in STEM, I'm in the sciences. You know, I'm pretty much, I am not an early adopter of like technologies. actually pretty technology hesitant. Like I tend to just like have a wait and see approach, like how things play out, then I'll adopt. But with that, I think I'm gonna end it here. I think I actually went longer than I anticipated, but that's actually not a problem at all. Enjoy that. Let's see if I can find someone to raid, but my next stream is planned for Thursday. I posted my stream schedule in the Discord if anyone wants to join. To either, yeah, you can share research, or you can suggest topics, or ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer. But yeah, I want to thank everyone that passed by. Kitty, thank you so much. Super appreciated. Reficules, Zeron, Bob Marley, Water Bucket as well. Shout out to them, Water Bucket Gaming, for passing by. If I can do this properly, should be their username. If you want health and fitness streamer, workout streams, definitely check them out, give them a follow. And I think we're going to raid into Astro Canuck. Gonna set that up. But yeah, like I said, next stream should be Thursday, roughly around the same time. Maybe I'll try to go live a little bit earlier. But yeah, thank you everyone. Again, Kitty, Reficules, Zeron, Bob Marley, Dolphy, anybody that I forgot, I apologize. I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of people. And also thank you, Bob Marley number 2, for the follow. Even though I think that's your doppelganger to Bob Marley number 1. So yeah, we're gonna raid into Astro Canuck. They are they're not only Canadian, but they're an astronomy. Well, they're a science and tech streamer. They do astronomy. And right now they're doing Lego building, so they're also an arts and crafts streamer. And thank you so much for the kind words. Super appreciate it. But yeah, that's gonna be it. Like I said, if you're not following Astro Canuck, they also have really chill vibes. And also, like, I'm super envious of their stream setup, because they have so much. So yeah, they just have invested a lot in their stream setup. Like, yeah, I'll be back again. I plan to be back on Thursday. And yeah, until next time, take care, be well, be kind.
I'm actually getting more than 3 bags done tonight.
Raid going through? I guess sometimes it takes a minute.
Everything else is an idea.